pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Castro, will you now take the role of LCPS Board of Education? Here.
Stallman?
Stallman's absent.
Mrs. Flores?
Here.
Which one?
Mr. Jaramillo?
Present.
And I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Castro. I would like to introduce our student advisor, Cameron. I'm not sure where you're sitting. Hi, Cameron. Okay, before we move on to the program, we have a presentation to do. We're going to go up to the podium with Senora Flores and Mayor Miyagishima, and we're going to make this presentation.
I had no idea I was getting an award.
Okay. Well, you want to read that?
Yeah, I'll do this.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
you can talk afterwards. Here.
This is kind of new for me.
Golly.
It's a live
What do I do?
You have electricity.
Poor Ed.
It is with extreme pleasure that I am presenting this plaque on behalf of the New Mexico School Boards Association to Mayor Ken Miyagishima. The purpose of this award is to recognize individuals who have made significant contributions toward the improvement of student achievement. Improving student achievement is why every educator comes to work. It's what we're all about. So, Mayor, thank you for all you've done, and congratulations on receiving this important award.
I'd like to say a few words. This award, I nominated the mayor. It's called the Excellence in Student Achievement Award, and the board voted that he was our nominee this year. It went up to the New Mexico School Board Association, and we call him a role model. He has been visiting our third grades for how many years, Mayor?
10.
For 10 years. And what he does is he talks to them about reaching the finishing line. He talks to them about finishing high school and going on with their education, about not losing hope. And then he gives them a certificate and says, and he tells them, see you at graduation. So this is why we nominated him and voted to give him this award. I think he deserves a whole lot more for reaching out to our students the way he does. It is amazing to me. We really, really appreciate the work he does with our third graders. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, President Flores and Superintendent Ewing. I have to tell you, we started this program in 2008, and it's a two-part program. In fact, those of you who have children who have gone through my program, will you raise your hand? Come on, there's got to be more than that. We estimate that we have met over 20,000 third graders. Took pictures with them, handed out certificates, and yeah, it's a lot. But our goal was to make sure that we had the highest graduation rate in our city in the state. And I'm really excited about 2018 because that's my graduating year. That's the year when I first started, they were the third graders, and they've moved up to 2018. And Dr. Ewing and a lot of the principals have all agreed to let me be at their graduation ceremonies because I want to see them cross the line, because I was a little bit tougher than what Senora Flores said. I told them, I said, if I find out that one of you didn't graduate, I want my picture and my certificate back because you broke a promise. And they all get a little quiet and they go, oh. But I said, but you guys are going to graduate, so you don't need to worry about it. Then they kind of go, yeah, you're right. So the other day I was at Cruces High, and I asked how many of them still remember me in their third grade. And about 3/4 of them did, because a fourth of them was sure moved away. And it was really neat to see that. So I'm going to I'm going to probably ask a show of hands one at graduation day to see the same. And then the other part of it is my fitness and nutrition program, making sure that our children, we have a high obesity rate in the United States, and we want to make sure that ours isn't that high. So it's pretty cool. 5 servings, fruits and vegetables, no more than 2 hours playing video games, watching TV, or playing on the computer. 1 hour exercise and 0 sodas. So the sodas really gets you. I mean, once in a while, I like a Diet Coke. Our city manager really loves Diet Coke. It got so bad that I could not buy a 6-pack of diet soda in a grocery store because there's usually a kid there with their mom, and if they see me buying a 6-pack of diet or soda, it was over. So I have to actually go to another county to go buy my soda. So, anyways, it's been great. It's been a great association with the schools, and thank you so much for this. I also want to, she's not here, but my assistant Carolyn Horner, when we set out to do this 10 years ago, that was our goal, to increase the graduation rate of our students, of our community, and looks like it's working. You guys are doing a great job too. Your educators were 15% higher than our surrounding communities. Let's see what next year is. We'll shoot for the 90s. Thanks.
So I will now turn the meeting over to Mayor Ken Miyagishima for the city's presentation.
Okay, well, thank you, President Frank. So I'm going to go ahead. Today is May 2nd. It's approximately 6 or 7 p.m. Wednesday. We're going to go ahead and convene the Las Cruces City Council. First item on our agenda will be school safety. And I just want to say that for many of those of you, how many of you out there were at our previous work session? So raise your hands if this is all new to you today. Okay, so for those new, I want you to know that we had a really good work session on our city council meeting. Came up with a lot of good ideas, and I think a lot of it's going to be incorporated on what we wanted to do. And so we felt, the council and I felt it was best that if we were to come up with an idea, then we'd have to turn around and give this to a school board. So why not just have a joint meeting together? This way here, whatever we can do to help, we can get an idea from the schools what assistance they could use if needed, and how we can work together to make sure that the schools are as safe as they possibly can be, so that your children, our children, have a safe environment and can go on and get a great education. I for one, can say that, plus we can't, but we're not looking to ban anything or restrict anything, but how can we make our schools safer? We got a lot of information from a lot of good people that gave us some good background, whether it's securing the schools, cameras, locks, panic buttons, maybe having the guards that currently work for the schools, allow them to have a carry and concealed weapon, things of this nature, things that are just germane to making schools safe. So I just want you to be aware of that. I know there's a lot of people want to make some comments, but I will say that I'm a visitor here. So this is the gentleman who's going to be running the meeting. I'm here for moral support. But we have some good stuff, and I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, who's our policy analyst, who's going to share with you some of the things that came out of our meeting and what we hope to focus on, and present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, I am Elizabeth Teeters. I am the policy analyst for the City of Las Cruces, and I want to welcome you all here this evening, members of the council, Mr. President, and members of the board. We are here tonight to talk about school safety, and when you're talking about school safety, there are 3 main issues that come up in most conversations, and it came up at our council meeting a month or so ago. The first one is preventing gun violence. Then there's mental health and school security. I will be discussing preventing mental health, and then we will be turning it over to the school district to be discussing I'll be discussing preventing gun violence, and then we'll be turning over to the school district for mental health and school security. So as the mayor had said, we had a lot of public input at the council meeting on March 19th, and so I'm going to go through a few slides to talk about kind of what was discussed from the public. So when it comes to guns, protect both school children and the public in Las Cruces, ban bump stocks, increase penalties when it comes to guns, no private sales without gun background checks and universal background checks. And when it comes to the mental health, we need to work to identify children who may have challenges. And then with school security, this was brought up quite a bit, but security doors, cameras, and intercoms, all gates need to be locked. The SROs in all schools should have direct access to the principals, and the teachers should have panic buttons. And since that council meeting, it has been my job to do research on the different shootings that have happened throughout the country. Since 1989, I researched 22 shootings. And so this is the statistics that came out of it. In incidences where multiple guns were used, it could be semi-automatics or not, it doesn't matter. On average, there were 10 deaths and then 14 injuries. If a single gun was used and it was a semi-automatic, there were 7 deaths and 9 injuries. If there was a single gun and it was non-semi-automatic, there were just 2 deaths and 1 injury. Then there's a statistics on the gun laws in the United States. Now, these statistics are just for state gun laws. It is not about the city gun laws, it's just state gun laws. And so this graph was put together in 2015, based on 2015 data about gun deaths versus strictness of gun laws. So you can see the red line is the number of deaths per 100,000 residents, and then the yellow line is the stringency score. So it is how strict the gun laws are in a given state. And based on this information, the graph is showing that the more stringent that the gun laws are, the less deaths there are. Now, these deaths do include suicides. They are all gun deaths, but it is showing that. Now, this stringency score was based on the following criteria. It is category 1 is keeping guns out of hands of dangerous people. So this is talking about background checks and other laws, people who are dangerous to selves and others, drug and alcohol abusers. Category 2 is stopping the supply of crime guns. So laws and policies to stop gun deals from supplying criminals with guns, stop gun traffickers. And then category 3 is national gun violence statistics, which is gun death rate, crime gun exports, gun laws, and policies. So that is the information I have provided for you today is based on just the shootings that I looked into and the gun laws in the United States. As a city of Las Cruces, we, as the mayor, had talked about, we cannot affect gun laws in the state. That has to be done at the state level. So the city is here as a support to both what they believe is correct, the city council, and of the school district. So with that, I don't know, are we going to be taking questions?
That's okay,
Okay.
Elizabeth. We're going to go ahead and let the schools make their presentation, and then we'll probably, I'm assuming that let the school board speak first, and then council members speak, and have that discussion. And then after that's all said and done, you hear what some of the ideas and suggestions are, then perhaps the president will open up to the public and hear the comments.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So at this time, I would like to invite LCPS mental health and counseling staff to provide information regarding the district's efforts in the area of mental health and student well-being. After their presentation, district safety and security experts will present on the district's current and future security plans.
Good evening. My name is Amy Himmelwright. I'm the Employee Assistance Program Coordinator for Las Cruces Public Schools. I'm an educator of 21 years, and this is my 16th year with Las Cruces Public Schools. This is, oh, go ahead, Magdalena.
Hello, I'm Sonia Saiz. I am the coordinator of psychology, counseling, and social work services. I am an educator and social worker for over 16 years now, and most of my experience has been with school systems.
Hello, I'm Julie Kirkus. I'm the health services social worker for also the Las Cruces Public Schools. I've been in that capacity for 18 years. Thank you.
So we calculated, amongst us, we have over 60 years experience in New Mexico Public Schools. We're proud of that. So as an educator of 21 years, I can say that I am very, very excited about the progressive stance Las Cruces Public Schools is taking on mental health. In the last year even, we've seen some big changes that are very, very progressive and very cutting edge. And I'm really excited to share about that. I think we're going to become really a model for the state and even for other states for the country in the next soon years to come. So we have 4 or 5 schools that have adopted a restorative and trauma-informed school model. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is. But those schools are Lynn Community School, a middle school, Sonoma Elementary School, Booker T. Washington, and Valley View Elementary School, along with Mesilla Valley Leadership Academy. These schools are modeling a restorative justice, a restorative and trauma-informed model program that we hope will then kind of be adopted by other schools. But these are our pilot schools, and that have just kind of taken this on this year. So the reason that this is important is that we know that our biggest preventative kind of measure that we can take in mental health for our kiddos is it has to be comprehensive. We've been saying that for years. We've been talking about the whole child and how to meet the needs of whole child. Well, trauma-informed schools, restorative schools, that's what they do. They look at the whole child and meet the needs of the whole child. And they're a place where there's a foundation, as demonstrated in this slide, of 100% commitment from all the leadership, all the adults, to this new model. It's a place where we hold kids and adults accountable, where we take regular climate surveys from parents and caregivers. There's real-time collection of data and for review with staff. And most importantly, from a mental health perspective, there's positive behavior support interventions. And so what that means is instead of just being putative, and this is the key, in a trauma-informed restorative school, we are restorative. And so we have actually a director for the last year. We've had an executive director of Student Success and Restorative Justice. That's Andreas Armijo. He's here today. We also have a director of Equity, Innovation, and Social Justice, Dr. Lozano. So this is big. It shows a big commitment to school-wide change, and we're very excited. So in this model, there are these tiers of support, and 100% of students are all getting some level of support. We have that in place in Las Cruces Public Schools, and we'll share that with you. And then as you can see, as need increases, the support shift. So some things that we have in place right now at the foundation level for all of our staff, we have the Safe Schools online training. We have, and this would be kind of a secondary level, we have school-based health centers at all of our high schools. And at the school-based health centers, any of our high school students can access mental health services. And that's in addition to the mental health providers that we have through the district on campus. School-wide, at a primary level, we have signs of suicide prevention curriculum available to all of the secondary schools. In fact, Sierra Middle School, and Sonia, we'll talk a little bit about that, just did that program today, school-wide. So all of our schools have social workers, counselors, and/or psychologists and nurses on site in every school for social emotional support to students and staff. We have an employee assistance program and a staff wellness program to care well for our staff, who then in turn can care well for our students. And we've made big efforts in the area of mindfulness-based stress reduction. We partner with New Mexico Public Schools Insurance Authority, who paid for all LCPS staff who chose to take an 8-week online course in mindfulness-based stress reduction. For employees that chose to complete that, they also were able to attend a live webinar that instructed them on how to connect that to the classroom. And then we have mindful practice training for staff with classroom applications ongoing. We partner with NMSU and through their ASSIST and WAVE programs. ASSIST is Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. So through NMSU and ASSIST, all of our mental health staff have been trained on suicide awareness and prevention. And at least all of our mental health staff were about 3 years ago in full, and then this year in August, all of our mental health staff had a review, a professional development review. We partner with the Coalition Against Bullying, and then currently we have an in-house crisis prevention and intervention team, and again, it's a partnership. So we have our mental health personnel on the team. We partner with the Department of Health, School Mental Health Advocate, and School Health Advocate. Our LCPS Health Services, Safety and Security Department, and then we partner with the NMSU Department of Counseling and Psychology. So our goal is to evaluate what we have in place, see what's working, and then really pave a plan for how we need to evolve, and then deliver that, make sure that happens and deliver it in a uniform method across the school district.
Thank you.
I am really mindful of the time. I think we have 6 minutes or something. I think we just used 4, maybe 5. So I just really quickly just wanted to say that we have some fabulous school counselors and social workers in our district. Like I said, we're at every school. The delivery models we follow, of course, are the American School Council Association as well as the School Social Work Association of America. What does that mean in plain English? That means in plain English, we are available to assist students. We are available to assess, intervene, crisis response, counseling, referral for community mental health services if that's indicated, support families, to look for signs of academic disruption and if mental health is potentially affecting that. So we just work really well with all of our school staff. Let's see, I'm just gonna go fast. One of the things that I talk about, pretty much tenets for school counselors, social workers, educators everywhere, is that each child have one adult on campus that they can go to, that they feel that is their go-to person. And I just had that happen today, where I had a student that emailed a teacher overnight with some very concerning information. That teacher then turned it over to the administrator. Administrator called me in. Great outcome. That student was supported, and that was the ultimate goal, is we've got that student what that student needed.
So moving forward, my position specifically as the coordinator of the psychology, counseling, and social work services was created just this school year. It's not something that to my understanding, has been in place before. We've had different people who have served as the person to oversee these services, but the end goal is about bringing together a framework that is comprehensive with regard to our mental health and counseling services for our students throughout the district, PK-12. What I'm working towards is outlined on this slide, and we have a prepare curriculum that is really about addressing crisis, the crisis that come about with what our nation has experienced lately, or the crisis that I attended to just earlier this afternoon, given the sudden death of a staff member at one of our elementary schools. So it's really about how we move forward to improve and bring together the services that we already have in place. This year I see as a year of gathering information and building relationships with those providers, because they don't always feel like they have a voice for what they need, and what they're telling me they need is they want something a little more unified, and professional development that really helps them stay on top of what their skills are. So that's the efforts moving forward. And then these are our community partners, as we've mentioned once before.
Thank you. Now for the next component of the school district presentation, public safety.
Good evening, honorable members of the council, the board, mayor, board president, and distinguished guests. Superintendent Dr. Ewing. I'm the director of public safety for the Las Cruces Public Schools. My name is Todd Gregory. I'm going to talk a little bit about school safety and security, give us a little history lesson of what we have been doing over the last at least 11 years that I've been here and what we're going to continue to do. I've been fortunate to serve this community for over 30 years. I was proud to serve with the LCPD Police Department and also worked with the school resource officers at that time, and I'm still proud now as a member of the school district to continue that partnership with the SROs and our students, parents, and staff. Again, it's been a long time. I do want to reiterate that school safety isn't new to us. We deal with this on a daily basis. And a good example of that is we're at Oñate, and I'm very proud of my campus guards and the administrative staff here at Oñate because they did come across a suspicious person, dealt with them, got with the SRO, and we took care of the situation immediately. And that's a good example of why we're here today, to engage with the community and be proactive and talk about more measures that can actually help us improve our school environment. Again, some of the past examples of our initiatives. You know, our school resource program, which is the police officers that the city provides to our secondary schools, it's been an ongoing program for over 20 years. We've also expanded that to the town of Mesilla, and we are, because of these newer conversations with the community, also talking about expanding that further in the future. We have campus guards or security guards that are working at our secondary schools, and that's our middle school and high schools. But we're also kind of looking, you know, reminding staff and parents, students, that we're all safety agents in this community. We're all there to keep everybody safe. And so we're hoping to look at that to add some more security to our schools. Our last two bond cycles in 2014 and 2018, which the members of the public and members here also were the ones that passed those bond initiatives. And those initiatives help us create safer environments. So without your vote and your support, we wouldn't be able to do a lot of the stuff that we've already been doing since 2014. Again, we continue to partner with our local emergency planning committee, the city-county Office of Emergency Management, to conduct exercises. And these are community-wide exercises and drills and tabletops. And so we're doing that on a yearly and ongoing basis. And we've also brought in nationally and internationally recognized training for SROs and security guards and staff for threat assessment, for the SRO program. I myself have been through the advanced, the basic, and the management SRO program. So it's an ongoing process. So by the numbers, and I did have a handout, and I don't know if you guys have the NIJ handout. And basically, it's through the U.S. Department of Justice. It's School Safety by the Numbers, and it's at nij.gov. And I have a few here that I can hand out or have available. And so this one kind of, what's nice about this handout is it's why we're here. I mean, we're getting public input. We need talking points, and this handout is really starts that conversation and focuses our conversations. So as you can see, school crime rates have been decreasing. Of course, that could depend on the state and the community, but I know our community, our rates have stayed pretty level and decreased. And so that kind of gets us, we understand that it's certain crimes that we need to focus on, not all of them. And then school shootings are fairly rare. Now, this year has not been a very good year, but they're very highly publicized, but we are talking about it. And we need to know that in the past, we do have state laws, we do have gun-free school zones, we do have school policies that address violence or criminal acts on school property. But we do have to prepare for it, and that's where the conversation needs to go. Everybody has to prepare for it. And we as a district, you know, our goal is to educate students how to live in the community, to graduate, to be stellar community members, and that they need to know how to respond to these incidents. And we want to teach them that. We want, as our partners here, the school resource officer, the teachers and staff, we want to teach them how to do that. And then, of course, school violence is not new to us. We do, as you could hear the previous presentation, we do deal with that on an ongoing basis, whether it's fights, custody disputes, domestic violence. So we're always dealing with some type of violence. It's not new to school staff, and we're pretty well versed in trying to deal with it. And then, as we talk about these school shootings, so we are talking about this. So we have started, you know, Oñate is another good example. The SROs, we've all went to the analyst training to be instructors, and so they've initiated with parents, with staff, and students, and we're going to continue that effort district-wide. And that training really shows us how to respond to these, you know, these rare incidents, but they're deadly incidents, and we need to know how to respond to them. And then, again, traumatic events we do have to deal with, as the previous presentation talked about. And then, of course, our community, social media has become a big issue within our community. I know Mr. Hawkes, Dr. Ewing, Sean, and many of us, as Sergeant McCord, we spent many sleepless nights following up on threats or social media posts. And so we think that's a big issue that we need to learn more about, where they're coming from, and get the parents involved to help with the students, because the social media posts are very disruptive to our campuses and the community. So we're learning more about that. So this handout kind of gives a good focus point on our talks. Again, when we're talking about responding or dealing with emergencies, we're looking at an all hazards approach. We will have conversations about an active shooter or an active killer, but we still have to have an all hazards approach. Because as you can see today, wind is a hazard, so we have to deal with the buses, or we have to be prepared for what we're doing with after school activities. So we look at these all hazards and how we're going to respond to every emergency, and try to think of what we are going to do and how we're going to do it. So our focus is really, you know, our crisis team at the district works well with the local authorities and the Office of Emergency Management to respond to these incidents. And our crisis team is very effective at responding to crisis, and we talk about it daily and monthly. Again, we continue to stress with our administrators at the school sites that, you know, drills are required, not just fire drills, but shelter in place, evacuation drills, and active shooter drills. And so we keep stressing to them at our principals meetings, at our trainings at the very beginning of the school year, that our safety plans, our drills are important, And we also want the community to hold us accountable for that, to let us know. If we're not doing drills, then we will get to it. We will take care of it for you. Our student handbook and student parent handbook kind of talks about our policies on what's appropriate, what's not appropriate for parents and students, but it has good information about how we get information out, how we talk about emergency response. And then talking about our safety plans. We work with New Mexico PED, worked with Homeland Security and other entities, and have created a nice safety plan guidebook for us to use. In my department, we help them, each school, develop these plans. We work with the SROs, their safety committee, and we're putting this all-hazard plan together. And these plans are, they are implementing best practices across the country. So, you know, we do have run, hide, fight. We do have lockdown, evacuation, shelter in place. So they are implementing best practices across the country. And then, of course, we've had a lot of talk about our bond projects because we are trying to increase security measures, access control, and so we work a lot with this concept of crime prevention through environmental design. And that's one of the concepts that the SROs learn, that I've learned, that architects learn, and so it's a good concept to know that when we look at designing or improving schools, there are some very good best practices out there. And again, I encourage all of you to visit ready.gov. It has active shooter, it has tornado, it has all, it's on your app, on your phone that your whole family can have. And again, some of the proactive measures, we're going to continue to look at our school lobbies. We've identified and assessed the schools so we know that we have vulnerabilities. We are going to control access. We're going to improve that with these last two bond projects, and that's ongoing. Again, we're still looking at adding more campus guards. We have added a couple of newer positions this year at an elementary school and a middle school, which is going to be greatly appreciated by me and the public and the principals. We're also looking at arming school professionals that are security professionals, that have law enforcement, that have the background that we know can handle this type of responsibility. Again, updating the safety plans. We're going to finish our lockdown buttons, access control, PA, fire safety initiatives. That's already been ongoing since 2014, but we're going to continue those efforts through 2018 and on. And then, again, proposed increase in expanding the SRO program, if possible, with other entities, NMSU, Town of Mesilla, the City of Las Cruces, so that we can provide some resources for our population. And then looking at how we can get emergency notification to you, whether it's on the phone, the app, so that you know what's going on or that things are being handled. And so some of these pictures just kind of show where we've tightened up access control in our courtyards. We've controlled access at the front entrances. That way we can manage visitors. We can manage people that are coming to schools. We found too many schools to have too many hallway access points, so that we're trying to shore that up. Again, just some more examples of, you know, creating some inner, outer perimeters, gating, lobby controls. Any questions or comments?
So we're going to have an opportunity for questions and comments after both presentations are done. So I think at this point we can move on to the next segment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was incredibly informative. Thank you.
Hey, Todd. Before Todd leaves, if I may, Mr. President, I'd like to kind of brag a little bit about Todd. You know, he's very unassuming, he's very modest, but I've known Todd for a long time, and the city of Las Cruces is very proud of him. As he mentioned, he retired from Las Cruces Police Department as a lieutenant. I think he was on his way to captain, but he loved working in the schools, so he decided to forego that and just retire, and he's been doing a great job. He really has, and I think it's a lot of it is because of Todd and his staff, his team. He loves police work. I mean, that's in his blood. In fact, when I think I met him when he was a teenager, his girlfriends all had to come from police families. That's the only ones he's date. I mean, and he still donates his time uncompensated to an organization called New Mexico Mounted Patrol on the weekends. So he's still a certified police officer, but it's amazing. I can't thank you enough on behalf of the city of Las Cruces, and I'm sure Las Cruces Public Schools as a whole, for what you do to protect our children in the schools.
Yes.
Thank you.
So apparently our presentations are completed, so at this point we will have discussion on the dais. So anybody want to ask questions or speak? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. If Ms. Tietzer can come back up, I appreciate it. I want to thank Director Garrison for mentioning the fact that we've had, and I'm Greg Smith, that we've had this issue with violence at the schools for a long time. It actually started in about 1853. The first public school opened in 1835, and in 1853 there was a shooting. 2 people were injured, nobody was killed. But Ms. Tietzer, if you can bring up slide number 4 on that second presentation. What we should note is, as Director Garrison pointed out, this issue's been with us for a while. But what we see happening, unfortunately, is in recent years, we've had more incidences and more people killed and more people wounded in these incidences.
Mr. Mayor, President, and Councilor Smith, I'm sorry, did you mean slide 4 of your?
Of the backup presentation.
I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to make sure.
And so on this particular slide, what you'll see is that I broke it out into 20-year periods, and during those 20-year periods, we had a minimal number of shootings in the schools, each of those periods up until the 1970s and 1980s. And so that's what that last spike is there, that's actually an 18-year period. I wanted to have a nice, neat 30-year period between 1988 and 2018. But in that period, in that particular cycle of 18 years, we see a spike there. And then, Ms. Tietzer, if you can go then to slide number 8. These are the years, the 30 years I was talking about between 1988 and 2018, the year we're in now. And as you can see, in that period of time, in that 30-year period of time, we've been exceeding what was going on in the 135 years prior to that. And so one year, 1998, has a nice, well, unfortunately, not a very nice, but a spike that you'll notice. So going to 1998, Ms. Tietzer, I think we have 1998. Yeah, if you'll go to slide number 9, please. And you'll see that there were several shootings that year, but the one that has a big spike to it is Thurston High School. And Thurston High School had 2 semi-automatic handguns used and 1 rifle. So we have this spike, we have a apparent early sort of relationship between the semi-automatics being used. If you'll go then to slide number 18, please. In 1999, we had Columbine High School shooting, and we're most of us rather familiar with that. There were 2 semi-automatic weapons used. One was a rifle and one was a handgun at Tech 9. Which was supposed to be illegal at that time, I believe, because it was so easily, closely resembling the handling of an automatic weapon. Then we move on to number 29, please. Slide. In slide number 29, we have Red Lake Senior High School, and in this particular instance, Red Lake, there was a Winchester shotgun and a Ruger semi-automatic pistol used in this particular instance. And then if we can go to number 38, please. This is the Sandy Hook incident, and you can see a very high number of mortalities, and of course, people are pretty familiar with the fact that an AR-15 was used at that particular incident, but there were also 3 other guns used at that particular one. 2014, if you could go to slide 41, please. We had a lot of shootings that year, but most of them, you'll notice that the numbers there, the highest number of mortalities was 5, but most of them were actually just woundings, and those were in the numbers of 1 to 4. And so even though it was unfortunate that there were so many shootings, we didn't have a whole lot of deaths or woundings in that particular year. Coming then on up to slide number 46, please. Thank you. Rancho Tehama Elementary School in California, there was a pistol, 2 pistols, and a semi-automatic rifle used in that particular one, and a ghost rifle. That means that the serial numbers have been wiped off of it. And in that particular instance, fortunately, there were only 6 people killed, and a large number, 18, were wounded. But even so, we see that, again, the use of the weapons appears to have made the difference in how many people were killed and wounded. And finally, if you'll go to slide number 51, please. This year, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, is the most recent, but there are a large number of people killed. There have been, I think, 3 shootings since then, but in this particular instance, an AR-15 again was used, a semi-automatic rifle. And so what I would ask you to consider is that we're seeing this increase in the number of people being killed and the number of people being wounded, and it seems to correspond with the use of semi-automatic weapons. And that's where I arrived at when people were asking me, what is the city going to do about these shootings and the fear that our children are experiencing going to school at the Las Cruces schools? And there seemed to be this correlation between the semi-automatics used and the number of people who were harmed. So that's what I ask you to consider as we talk about this. I believe that it is very important for us to look at security at the schools. It's very important for us to look at the mental health of people, not only in school, but who might have contact with our school children and other people in the community. And I think if we were actually able to take care of or do a really super wonderful job of addressing the mental health issues, and I want to thank Councilor Ekman for bringing up that issue frequently and pressing on it. But if we were able to take care of that one piece, the other 2 would be much less necessary. And so talking about what kind of weapons people have access to or what kind of access they have to our children in our schools would be less important, less necessary if we were fully and carefully and completely addressing the mental health needs. But that also, of course, is an expensive and long-term project, and it's something that people have been working on. So I thank you for your indulgence, and Ms. Tietzer, thank you so much for running the slides. I just wanted to make that point as we're talking about this. I absolutely commend the schools on working on those other 2 issues, but I do think that there is some justification for us asking about the kinds of weapons and how people have access to them. And it's not, as some people have mentioned, that we're asking for a ban, or that I wasn't asking for a ban because we haven't passed a resolution yet, but that we are asking or I'm asking, and I believe some of my colleagues would agree, that we're asking our legislators to look at this issue and act upon what they believe will be the most effective way to reduce the access that people have to the kinds of weapons that are doing this harm. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor. Does anybody else? Yes, Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Councilor Smith, thank you for your information. I just got a quick question. Did you, when you were doing your analysis, did you by any chance have an opportunity to find out what % of the children or the kids who did some of the shootings were on antidepressants?
Ms. Tietzer was doing some research on a variety of things, but I don't think either one of us looked at the number of children that were on antidepressants.
Okay, I was just curious. I know that there's been a study out that, first off, that they've increased by 30% the children have been taking, that I guess doctors have been prescribing a lot more. And I was just curious to see if that had...
Well, thank you for asking about that, Mr. Mayor. It's certainly one of the areas that we probably need to keep an eye on.
Does anybody else on the dais? Yes, Senora Flores.
Thank you, President Frank and Mayor, City Councilors, and board members. Ms. Dahlman is not here because she had a severe reaction to an insect bite this morning, and her eye is greatly swollen. But she is actually watching, and she asked me to ask the city what I know that we presented on mental health practices within the schools, and I'm just wondering if the city has any, how would you say, services or access to what recommendations does the city provide on that for mental health for our older students, young adults?
If I may say something, then I'm going to ask Councilor Gandara to conclude. I've learned a lot since she's come onto the board. She's been invaluable to the City Council. In fact, the other day, we were talking with a colleague of hers. First off, you know, I never had, and forgive me, for those of you that I didn't have a chance to introduce who's with us here at the city. Let me just start on my left. We have Fire Chief Enriquez, Police Chief Gallagher, Assistant City Manager Bill Studer, Assistant City Manager David Dallahan, our City Attorney Jennifer Vega Brown, our City Manager Stuart Eade, myself, Ken Miyagishima, Councilor, what is that? Yvonne Flores, District 6, Councilor, kind of Ray's in the way here. Sorg, Mayor Pro Tem Sorg, Councilor Jack Ekman, District 4. Is there someone between you two? I don't know who that is.
Cameron.
Oh, that's Cameron, okay.
Not yet.
That's a high school student. He looks like a 25-year-old lawyer, but...
and sounds like one, too.
Yeah, yeah, he's with the schools. We're trying to get him over to the city, but...
You can't have him.
You can't have him, yeah. District 2 Councilor Greg Smith, and District 1 Councilor Cassandra Gandara. So Councilor Gandara retired as a social worker professional, and like I said, I've learned a lot from her. So we were talking, she had a colleague who was talking with me, Dr. White, Sandra White, and it dawned on me, and it's so ironic that we talked a little bit about this program that I've been doing, because there's so many great professionals out there that can help the children once they're brought to them. And it kind of like that old Ford commercial, the light goes off. I realized, remember, we go to almost all 25 elementary schools every year, about once a week, and I meet with sometimes 100 kids, 150, and out of those, I'll come across one, there's always one that says, oh, you came to my other school last month. And I thought, you know, I might be at Conley, and I was at University Hills two months ago, so that tells me right there, they're wandering. So I need to be able to, and this is what I was telling Dr. White, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to add to my list. Of course, I'll between Ms. Horner and my other assistant, I think we can spot them. I'll just make a note of it. They'll just casually mention it to the teacher, and then the teacher can turn it over to the counselor, and they can follow up with that. You know, because I see it. They come to, you know, they'll say I came to their school a couple months ago when I shouldn't have. There was one poor young kid, he was asleep the whole time. I mean the whole thing, he couldn't stay awake. There's some, once in a while, that acts up, and another, you can tell they're just totally neglected. So it takes me seconds to spot that. I mean, they're there, we take pictures with them. So I think that's one thing that I'm going to do. But I'm going to turn it over to Councilor Gandara, because she's our resident expert.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, my esteemed colleagues and President Frank, thank you. Again, I'm a licensed social worker. Currently, I've been in this community working as a social worker for 28 years, primarily in child welfare, and I've seen it all. I've been in homes, investigating abuse and neglect of children, and trying to provide training to parents as it relates to parenting skills. And what the mayor is talking about, what we've been talking about, is two things that I'd like to express tonight. Is one, we've developed a mayor's task force for the prevention of suicide. This group consists of many individuals in our community that are social workers, counselors. There's people from the schools that have participated, and we provide essentially capacity building for our community and our professionals around suicide prevention. And primarily we've done the QPR, the question, persuade, and response, something that's really important to all of us in our community. Our suicide rates are extremely high, and these are things that, and speaking to Sonia, who we have developed a great working relationship in the schools, is something that we really need to be aware of. Secondly, we have, I chair the Coalition Against Bullying, alongside Commissioner Garrett, and we meet on a monthly basis, and also provide a lot of training and capacity building. We've done a few trainings on mental health first aid, not only to the school personnel, to include counselors and social workers, but ancillary staff, and also city staff, and I've been very appreciative of Mr. Eid and his essentially commitment to us on the council, but to his staff as it relates to ensuring that his staff is trained on detecting suicide, and just essentially having an understanding about mental health, what they need to do when they come across somebody that might need some additional support, and who to refer to, what agencies are in the community. So we've been working diligently on that, and some of the dialogue that I've had with Mayor has been to incorporate the mental health first aid in, or the question, persuade, and respond as it relates to prevention of suicide in his discussions with the high school students, or when he's out addressing third graders. It's extremely important. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. You know, I will say we have another resident expert, and that's, I was going to call him Dr. Jack Ekman, but Jack Ekman, he may want to say a couple words, but I will tell you this much. This is why I'm really always so proud to serve with my colleagues. The one who really has money set aside for health care, and believe it or not, you pay through your taxes 1/8% is the county. The county takes in, it's called a fund called the Indigent Care Fund. Well, that term kind of went away, but the tax still continued. In fact, the county receives over $4.5 million a year. So I finally was able to get a breakdown as how they spend it. And they spend it, $1 million goes to local providers, 1.3 goes to the ambulance service, 100,000 in some minor claims, and 2.2 million goes back to the state to go back and be distributed to other communities, which isn't right. And this is something here that money could be easily used to help with our schools here locally. This is something here that we need to let the current administration, well, they're going to be gone here in a few months, but this is something here that they need to know that they shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be taking our tax dollars, your tax money, and taking it up to Santa Fe and then spreading it out to other parts of the state. That's not right. And so that's what we need to make sure that money stays here and can be used to help the situation at hand. One thing that I also want to just, for some clarification, I want you guys all to know this. I'm sure you all have maybe heard some whispers that I belong to an organization called Mayors Against Illegal Guns. And that's true. But I have to tell you, there's only a few that I don't like. I don't like fully automatic machine guns, unless you're on those that rare that you can have them. Uzis, sawed-off shotguns. Any of you own any of those? I didn't think so. even though the chief is here. Chief, are those legal?
No, sir.
So that's what I'm against. All the other guns are fine. I just want you to know that. It's amazing how someone can manipulate a website. I forgot, I think it's called Wikipedia. They can go in there and change whatever they want. I'm not changing. I don't even, that's amazing. They go in there and put down that I'm this, I'm for that. It's incredible. It's amazing how social media works. But hey, that's the world we live in. But I just wanted to clarify that, okay? I think it's important. I grew up in a military family. We all have weapons. I have my own carry concealed weapon license. But I just want you to be aware of that, please. So, Councilor Ekman, was there?
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate the opportunity. I should turn the microphone over to Dr. Ernesto Flores, however, who could speak to this directly. My take on what the city can do is, as chair of the Health Policy Review Committee of the city, we are studying the workforce needs we have in our community. We have a shortage of mental health care professionals, behavioral health professionals. Approximately 20 psychiatrists we are short at this time. And we really need to bring in those folks, psychologists, social workers, the whole milieu of professionals. We have some areas of our surrounding communities that have one therapist per 1,200 residents. And that is absolutely intolerable. We must get our ratios where they need to be so we can address the very serious problems we see in our newspapers and our TV every day, where we have things going on that are behavioral health problems. And so we'll be bringing that forward to the full council for consideration. Thank you.
So I'll just ask some more city councilors, and then I'll turn over to President Frank, and then I guess I'll ask the school board if that's okay. Any more questions from city council? Okay, Mr. President.
Okay, I think next up is school board member Mr. Jaramillo.
Thank you, President Frank. Mr. Mayor, I just want to say a couple of words. First off, I want to thank all of you for being here today, because this is an important issue that we need to talk about. I personally have 2 children in the Las Cruces Public School District. Both of them are going to be in high school next year. And so let me begin by saying, I want a quote by Frederick Douglass. It says, "It's easier to build strong children than repair broken men." And I'm a big believer in this statement. And one of the things I think that would behoove us elected officials is to, if we're going to talk about keeping children safe, then our first thing is that we need to invest in children. We need to make children our priority. And right now in New Mexico, I don't think children are a priority. If that's the case, I believe better than sending a resolution up about different types of automatic weapons or anything like that, we should be telling our legislators to fully fund early childhood education. We should be telling them to fully fund public education. We should be telling them to remove testing, millions of dollars worth of testing that we don't get results back for several months. Now, with that said, I want to, with all due respect, Councilor Smith, I have to tell you, I can't argue with your facts. Your facts are perfect. I agree with you. I personally agree with you. But I think that this is a complex issue that sometimes gets tangled in the Second Amendment. And one of the things I think we need to do as elected officials is make tough decisions and detangle the difference between school safety and a Second Amendment conversation, because I think they're separate. I want to protect my children tomorrow. I want to protect them every day, and I think we have the right people in the place to do that. And I fully trust our superintendent. I fully trust the staff and Mr. Gregory and all that. I want to say one more thing. I want to read you something here, and it says, "I have always felt that the action most worth watching is not at the center of things, but where edges meet. I like shorelines, weather fronts, international borders. There are interesting frictions and incongruities in these places, and often, if you stand at the point of tangency, you can see both sides better than if you were in the middle of either one." And I would encourage my colleagues, elected officials, to travel to that point of tangency. It's an uncomfortable place, but if we stay on one side or the other, we're not going to be able to view things the way other people view things. Now, it may not be my decision. I agree with many of the things that you're talking about, but if we are going to do anything with school safety, we need to be able to look at other people's perceptions and be able to look through the lens of someone else. And if we are fully going to protect our children, then we need to fully fund it. We need to fully make sure that we do, and if we raise good children, guess what? They become good teenagers, they become good college students, then they become good parents. And if we really want to break that cycle, that's where we need to do it. And so with that said, I just want to thank you guys for having this conversation, Mr. Mayor, President Frank, and Mr. Councilor Smith, because I think that we need to really work hard in detangling, because when we tangle that up, it becomes a political discussion, whether it's red or blue. And I don't represent children that are red or blue. I represent children, and I want to protect children. I represent families, real families that have different perspectives than I do, and I need to make sure that that is my number one goal. And so I think that your data, your presentation is amazing. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I personally I don't own a weapon. My father is a retired chief of police from Belen. My brother is a lieutenant for the Albuquerque Police Department. I grew up around guns. I personally am not comfortable with it. And I'm really not comfortable with arming our teachers. But you know what? Everywhere I go, there's someone that is protecting me with the weapon. And there's people protecting me with these things, and I want to be able to do that. If we're protecting us, I would rather them not protect us and protect our children in an elementary school or and I'm not saying to arm. I do not want to arm teachers. That is my personal opinion. I don't think that these teachers went to school to educate. They went to college to educate. They didn't take a class in a gun or safety or any of that sort of stuff. I think our teachers really want to do their job. I think it's going to be our job to make sure that we provide the right environment for them to do that. And if it's getting a SRO, or if it's getting someone with a gun outside to protect our children, then but it always comes down to money. So if we're going to do something, let's tell the legislators to fully fund and make sure that we have the money to protect our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ewing would like to make some comments now.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the board, and to the members of our audience. First of all, I'm proud to be the superintendent of the school system, and I'm even more proud to say that I'm a teacher at heart, and I've taught for 32 continuous years. Today was a very difficult day in my office and a very difficult day for the staff. We lost a teacher last night. And so if I may, Mr. President and Mr. Mayor, could I ask for a moment of silence in honor of a teacher who gave us 30 years of her life to the district? Thank you. And now, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and members of the school board, if I could take just a moment and recognize the teachers in the audience, would you stand for me, please? Teachers who are here. Thank you. And also, if I could ask the executive cabinet and the superintendent's cabinet, I think you're on the front rows, would you please stand? So my job looks easy every day, but I promise you it's not. But those folks make it much easier, and I just want to say thank you. I think we counted, we have an event every night this week, and so that tends to be our life. I also want to say to the social workers and counselors who were presenting, you said between the three of you, and I wrote it down, that you had 60 years of experience. Well, I'm going to raise you one. I'm going to put Erlinda in my camp, and between Erlinda and myself, we have over 75 years of experience. And we're proud of that. I also want to take a moment and say to the mayor and to the police chief, thank you so much for the SROs in our schools. And more importantly, thank you for the funding that you are working with us so that I'm looking at the CFO. I told you that we didn't have to pay the full bill. Thank you for contributing. We couldn't make it through each day without those SROs. Those are the school resource officers who are actually Las Cruces Police Department officers. I also want to say thank you. I see Sergeant McCord back there somewhere, and Lieutenant Rosa, if he is here. I speak with both of them and call on them frequently. So, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Police Chief, please know that your staff are working double duty, and I appreciate that very much. And I also want to say to our fire chief, although we are locking all of our doors, I promise you, you can still get out. You just can't get in. Right. And I want to thank you and your staff for helping us as we begin securing doors, but yet keeping buildings safe. And I couldn't be more honored or more proud to serve this community and to work with the humble teachers that I work with each and every day and to work with my staff. So thank you so much for all you do. And it's an honor to serve alongside you. Thank you.
Do any other school board members want to speak?
Mr. President, if I
Yes.
could. Thank you very much, Mr. President Frank, Mr. Mayor, Mr. City Manager, members of the City Council, and members of the school board. Let me just highlight one thing real quick. We're here to talk about safety in the schools, and how cool is this? We have this big dais of a bunch of important people from around the city, and sitting here with them is one of the students. You're here to talk about how you're going to keep me safe, and here I am to tell you and to provide you with feedback on how we as students think you can go about doing that. I think that's really cool, and I think that deserves a round of applause because the people on this dais want to hear from students. Now, from my perspective, I think we need to be very careful when we start discussing this issue. And I think what Board Member Jaramillo said about conflating the Second Amendment and school security is very important. If you take away one thing from tonight's meeting, you need to take that away, because here is a nonpartisan elected official of ours wanting to hear both sides of the argument and recognizing that maybe not all of the individuals in his constituency think that it would make sense to restrict the sale and possession of semi-automatic weapons in order to keep our schools safe. And that brings me to a question for Counselor Smith. Earlier on in this meeting, you stated that there were 3 important elements of the school safety issue. Number 1, you say, is gun control, the prevalence of semi-automatic weapons and the mass shootings in the research presentation that you described. Number 2 would be mental health protections and providing funding for things like that. Number 3 is school security. And while I appreciate your presentation on the gun aspect of it, my question to you as a student is, if you think the other 2 being mental health protections and school security are as important as the first one, How come we haven't seen a resolution from you or from any city council members in the aftermath of the Parkland event calling on our state lawmakers to provide greater funding to our 89 school districts for mental health protections and to provide a greater allocation of funds for school-based security, whether that be in brick and mortar projects or in the hiring of more security guards to have an actual physical presence on our campus. I had a meeting the other day and learned that we have 10 SROs in our district. Dr. Ewing, 43 campuses? Is that how many campuses that we have?
I'm looking at the deputy superintendent. When we count buildings, we go to 41.
Okay, so 41 school buildings throughout this town where we have kids, and we only have 10 school resource officers there to protect us. That's an element that needs to be looked at in this issue. What I really worry about, and something that I think Mr. Jaramillo would agree with me on, is that we need to make sure that we're including all aspects of school safety, because like you said, we need to make sure that the 25,000 students that I represent up here tonight are going to be safe. And you can't just look at one element of the issue and say, problem solved. So my question to you, Counselor, is in the future, would you be willing to work on any resolutions calling on our state lawmakers to pass mental health reform and provide greater mental health protections for our school districts and more security? Because you know what we see here is an admirable effort to protect our students, but I'm a student tonight telling you that I don't think it's enough.
I'm waiting for the will of the chair. May I speak?
I apologize, Mr. President Frank. Can I go ahead and yield the dais to Councilor Smith?
Yes, Councilor Smith.
Thank you.
Certainly can speak.
And Cameron, I'm sorry, I don't recall your last name, and it's not on the name tag, so I apologize.
Yes,
for
sir. My name is Cameron Castillo. I'm a student at Centennial.
Mr. Counselor, I don't allow the students to use their last name when we're taping events, so
I apologize.
we simply just call him by his first name, Cameron.
All right. Well, I'm accustomed to referring the people that we're having these conversations with as Mr. or Ms. Cameron, you ask about the two other elements, and the reality is that we have been working on those other elements. I call them the elephant in the room, in fact. But that's been an ongoing issue in our community. The references to what our governor has done to mental health opportunities or care services in this community and across the state, those play in directly to some of our concerns about suicides, concerns about mental health, concerns about people being cared for in our community. Those are things we have been working on. And I believe we also, the city doesn't really have the opportunity, one, to change the gun laws in the state, and that's why we're appealing to our legislators to look at the issue. Okay, we can't tell them. You ask me to tell them something. We can't tell them to do something. In fact, that's one of the ways you can just about guarantee that they're not going to listen to you. So you ask them, you request that they look at a situation. And in this particular situation, as much flack as I've received about referring to semi-automatic weapons, the reality is that the capacity of a weapon to do harm, when somebody's made the decision to do harm, it changes the dynamics of what happens once that person has set out to do harm. And that's the focus of the resolution that I presented. That's the focus of the conversation that I initiated. Now, on the other issues of school security, your school district is making those efforts. Your schools are a lot more lockable and locked down than they have been in the past. That is a piece of this picture. That is something that is happening. That is something that the schools, the city supports. We obviously, with the SROs and some of the other things, we are already working with the school district on that piece. And we're already working on the mental health piece. So those are two things we're working on. And many of us have requested that more funding go to things such as education. I'm a former educator myself. And so school children and their security and their learning and the environment in which they learn is something that I am very concerned about and something that I feel very deeply about. So you talk about the three aspects that we're presenting this evening, and I will suggest to you, and some of the people who have been applauding you and Board Member Jaramillo, don't want us to talk about guns. Do not want us to talk about that subject at all. So let me say a little bit more about what I meant by restricting. When we talk about restricting the weapons that are in people's hands, we don't necessarily mean that we're banning them. We don't necessarily mean that nobody can get access to them. In fact, since 1934, machine guns and sawed-off shotguns and some other things have been restricted. Right. That means that people can get them. They can have them in their possession if they get through, they go through certain registration processes, they pay a $200 fee. There are a number of things that people do with restricted weapons that don't prohibit them from having them. And so when we talk about the fact that some of these people in the room don't want any weapons restricted, but we already have restrictions on a number of weapons. And we already say, most of us say, that it's okay to restrict those weapons. We don't want them in people's hands. And so we're talking about what is it, and it may not be all semi-automatic weapons. It may be the size of the magazine, it may be the size of the capacity, the trigger capacity, some other things that make...
Please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
No, go right ahead.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
But the point is that if we're not going to talk about the kinds of weapons that turn into the weapons that do the most harm, if we're not going to talk about that, if we're not able to talk about that because people say, oh, it's a Second Amendment thing and we can't talk about it, and yet it's an aspect of what we're looking at, then I say we're restricting ourselves from talking about one piece of this that needs to be talked about. Whether we end up making a resolution that says for a very narrow piece or a larger piece, but we're asking, I feel, we should ask our legislators to look at this. And that's the reason behind the resolution. And it's not about banning all weapons, it's not about banning everyone from having access to them. It is about, excuse me.
Please
when it's your turn, please take it. At this particular point in time, in a civil society, we listen to each other. Thank you.
Councilor Smith, do you have anything else to add?
I just wanted to simply finish with Cameron as far as his asking the question of me, as his reference was that I hadn't looked at the other two items, and I would say that we have been looking at the other two items. This is the one that people tell us we can't look at, and I believe we need to look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for that, that exchange. As Councilor Smith said, we aim to be civil in this meeting, and we will make sure that that's the case. Okay, at this point, I would like to call on Senora Flores to make comments.
Thank you, President Frank. I appreciate what Board Member Jaramillo had to say, and I appreciate the sense of sensibility that our student brings forth, that this student actually went up to Santa Fe and presented, asked the legislators, and defended in front of the legislators to look at safe gun laws to improve gun safety. This is what concerns school board members, is the safety of our schools. And I also stand with Mr. Sorg. I understand he wants to talk about this. This is not restricted. I'm sorry, what did I say? Sorg. Councilman Smith, I apologize. And there's two Floreses on here, so, we're okay. But what I ask for from the community, from our leaders, from our students, from all of us that are here, is a sense of balance. We do not want to turn our schools into a war zone. We do not want to scare our students further We are buildings of education filled with relationships between adults and children. That is what our schools are about. And yes, we need to provide a safe environment. I believe in it completely. But I also do not want to excite the situation. Our schools are safe, and I know they need to be safer because of the current things that are happening in our society. We haven't been able to get more SROs because there is no more money. So then talk to our legislators and ask for those extra people that we need to be on our campuses. Our public education department is forever punishing us for not doing this or that or the other thing. They want us to spend more time testing, and we need more SROs. So it is a conundrum for all of us. We all want the same thing. I have grandchildren in public school. I want them to be safe, but I also do not want them to live in fear. I don't believe in that. Also, one more thing. I've talked to students recently, and they're not afraid of getting shot. They're afraid of bullying. This is a much more insidious, violent thing that is happening in our schools, and that is what many students have told me they worry about. So I just want to put out, we need to create a sense of balance, please.
Thank you. Any other school board members wishing to comment? Yes, Mr. Jaramillo.
I just wanted to follow up, and I also want to say I appreciate Cameron's insight as a student. And I just want to say, Councilor Smith, I agree with you. And I honestly do agree with you as far as the data and you know, the ability to, when somebody has a weapon, the mass destruction that something can happen when they're shooting at a rapid speed more than maybe a knife or whatever the case may be. But when we talk about schools being safe, I think although they mesh, I do believe they mesh. But if I want my son and my daughter to be safe in the next school year or in tomorrow, then I have to be able to try to separate these two things. And I want a security guard at Centennial High School. I want a security guard at Jornada Elementary School. I want a security guard at Loma Heights Elementary School. And I want our teachers to be able to walk inside and do what they do best, teach. And when I hear you say, you know, that it needs to be, yes, we do need to have that conversation. I'll be there with you when we have that conversation. But I believe the title of that work session that you brought this up was school safety. And that's where we have to separate the two. That's where we have to separate the two things. If we want Las Cruces public schools to be safe, then let's get those locks. Let's get the money, the funding. Let's get those panic buckets if that's what we want to do. Let's get the camera. Let's make sure that the bad people are not going to be able to access. And if they do, we are met with someone that can help them and protect my son, protect my daughter, protect your children. And so I don't want this to come across as me or as my opinion being opposite of yours. That's not the case. It is an addition. It is an addition. And I just want to make sure that we protect our children and we get the funding for it. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any other school board members who would like to comment? Okay, so.
Mr. President, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just have one more question from the student's perspective. A little over a year ago, the school board passed a policy that would grant the superintendent the authority to allow any one of our school district campus security guards the right to possess a concealed firearm on the job, provided that they went through the necessary training and certifications to do so. And up to this point, even over a year after that policy was passed, only one of our campus security officers in the entire district has been afforded the opportunity to possess a concealed firearm while at work. And that individual is Mr. Todd Gregory, our Director of Public Safety. So from a student's point of view, here we have a policy allowing for a greater security presence on our campuses, yet the only security presence that is being taken into consideration with this policy is the safety and security of the decision makers down at central office. So, Dr. Ewing, Mr. Superintendent Ewing, I was wondering if I could get an explanation as to why additional security officers throughout the district, many of whom are retired law enforcement personnel from throughout the state, haven't been afforded that opportunity.
That is coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, members of the board, and members of the City Council, and to the members of our audience. I think some of you have heard me talk before. So I was raised in West Virginia with a dad who taught me how to probably shoot a shotgun before I rode my first bicycle. I then lived in Atlanta, where I worked in a school district for 30 years. And I tell our executive cabinet here, what we used to do in Atlanta to relieve stress was we went to the shooting range together. And I'm a pretty good shot, if I do say so. And I practice shooting my initials when I go. And so I have enormous respect for a weapon, but I also understand a weapon. And so as the superintendent of schools, I have to be enormously careful when we decide to arm someone in a building and when we decide to put a gun in someone's hand. What we did was we passed a policy which the board allowed me to give authorization to individuals who apply. But along with the policy goes a regulation, and we've spent the last year working through that regulation. We've done a draft of that regulation in front of the board, and we've began looking at what the criteria would look like if we were to put a gun in an outside law enforcement person's hand. And so we've had conversations with our law enforcement officers, we've had conversations with Mr. Gregory, and we've looked at the retired police officers who are serving as security guards. So we're getting a step closer. I know safety is paramount each and every day, and I always say there's only two people to shoot in a school building, and that's teachers and students, and I don't want that to happen to anyone. And I also know if there is an active shooter, we have to neutralize that shooter to have less life lost and to save more individuals. And I'm committed to doing that, but I'm also committed to doing that methodically and as carefully as possible. So we're continuing to work on that, and I give you my word that I will continue to work on that, and I will continue to go before the board with information, and we will look on a slow, methodical process of who's on our staff, who has the training, who has the experience, and who has the ability. I certainly believe in collaboration and transparency, and so when you make decisions, especially decisions that affect an entire public, you have to have buy-in and understanding from all individuals. So I'm working through that, and I invite you, as I normally do, and I always say I'm going to take you with me to any speech I give, because you certainly have the ability to speak as well as I do, if not better. And so I invite you to work as we go through this challenge together to see how we can better keep students safe. And I'm also going to call on our Chief Financial Officer. Ed, can you come to the podium? I'm going to ask you some questions regarding finance here in just a minute. Yes. And now, Mr. President, I turn the microphone back over.
Okay. So,
President Frank? President Frank?
Mr. Mayor? Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Senora Flores.
Thank you. I wanted to address a little bit more in regards to what our student has brought up. One of the things that we've been doing this year is the restorative justice practices, and that requires a great deal of training of our staff. If we're going to introduce weapons in any capacity on our campuses, we also need to know how to not use them. Because as we've seen across the country, sometimes it is the student that is least able to defend themselves, either economically, language-wise, that may become the victim. So we must be very, very careful. That's why I bring up that word balance again. It's a painful step for the board, but we know where we need to go. Just give us the time that is needed. I didn't ask to be protected. I'm telling you that right now. I don't feel that I need to be protected. But Dr. Ewing comes from the South and has a different perspective on it. But I feel safe. And I hope that you do too, Cameron. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ellison? I made the same mistake.
So, Mr. President, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I know you and I have been having some conversations, and we're looking at what we're doing with our budget for next year, and we're also looking at what we're doing with our bond money and how we're able to utilize that bond money for safety and security features. And so, first of all, let me say to the mayor and to the members of the city council, thank you. There was a call and a reach out to offer us any type of funding we would need, a short-term loan or anything else that would help us as we go through this endeavor of securing schools. We had a presentation at the board meeting last night, and the deputy superintendent spoke about which schools don't have what we call front barriers to prevent people from going in. And then we talked about how we're beginning to secure side doors and back entrances, and how we can even put electronic locks so that we use, and you see I'm wearing, so this is a master key to every school in the district. So we have electronic locks on many doors now. We're getting better with that. But Mr. Ellison, could you talk us through, as you look at our bond that was recently passed, as you look at the funding that we have, do you feel comfortable that we have sufficient funding now to do some work this summer to begin closing the loopholes in those schools where we still have less than what I'm going to call a controlled access point in each building? And then could you talk about what we're legally allowed to use with our bond funding?
Yeah. Mr. President, members of the board, mayor, council members. So we are looking at a bond that we just passed, and that's going to be, it was a $50 million bond, and we'll be issuing that over 4 years, $12.5 million a year. First issue we're looking at is in August of $12.5 million. And so to bridge that gap, and then that usually takes about 30 days to close and get the cash funding for that. So in addition to that, we have funding that we receive from tax levies, who are HB 33 and our SB 9. And so we have some capital capacity, and then also out of our operational, we've been trying to establish a reserve cash flow at the end of this year that we'd also be able to use to bridge that gap. And so we're going to use that funding to start the project now. And so we're looking at the summer of bridging that gap. And so when we issued the bond, safety and security was one of the items on it, but it wasn't the only item on it. And so over the next 4 years, I think we'll have funding to start the project, but it will require additional funding to complete everything as far as physical barriers around the facilities, and we're talking about systems in place to panic buttons, new door access systems that might integrate with our video cameras, and other things like that. And so I think we have sufficient funding at least to start the project off, and I think we can bridge that gap this summer. And then also that would require, it takes time to actually complete those projects. And so as we look at Mr. Hawkes and the operational team and construction projects, I think we'll be able to start that. I don't know if we'll necessarily be able to have everything completed that we want to before school starts, but as far as funding goes, I think there's a greater need than the amount of funding that we have. And one of the issues that we've done with the bond is we tried to keep our taxes flat and not raise taxes in the county. And so if we were to exceed and need additional money and do more bonding in the future, that would require an increase in our tax levies. And so we're trying to avoid that for the county. But I think the amount of money that we have through our operational fund balance, some, and the capital funds that we do receive now is enough to start the project. Is that?
Thank you. And then could you also speak to the members of our audience and to council members and the board? We're preparing a budget that we will present. The administration simply prepares the budget. It must be approved by the Board of Education and then approved by the Public Education Department. As we are in the midst of those budget preparations, which also includes collective bargaining agreements with both the certified and classified union, it also includes funding of a 2.5% average raise for teachers, a 2% average raise for classified staff, and then $2,000 increments for Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 beginning level teachers. We've had some very serious conversations about safety and security, and so can you talk through with the audience our ideas of providing security, additional security at additional schools, and where you are in looking at that information?
Yes, Mr. President, Dr. Ewing. So we are, this year, the state, through the appropriations bill, had it basically mandated a pay increase for teachers level 1, 2, and 3, which increased them on an average of about, well, on level 1 it was 5.8%, level 2 that was 4.7%, and on level 3 that was like 3.6%. And so then an average of 2.5% increase for all teachers and an average 2.5% increase for all staff in the district, not just classified. And so we have that, which we were also underfunded for. And so as we're looking at safety and security being the priority, we did put out a community survey for budget, and the number one thing that came back was safety and security for the schools. And so as we're looking at our budget, in addition to providing a pay increase for our teachers and the rest of the staff in the district, we are also looking at adding about 25 more security guards for elementary schools, and we're seeing if we can build that into the budget. And so we still haven't quite got through it. We're over what we probably would be more comfortable with in staffing, but we're looking at what other areas we can cut. And then we're also looking at 4 additional security guards to run kind of a night shift to be able to respond to alarms and various things like that. And so that would be a total of 29 security guards that we're looking at adding this next year if our budget can afford it. And so we're looking at that now, and hopefully that we'll be able to do that, since that's one of the #1 priorities, which may require us, cutting in some other areas.
So Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, I just want to reassure you, we are having serious conversations, and we're working. I look at the executive cabinet on the front row. We're working very diligently to see what we can do with the scarce dollars that we have, while at the same time giving our teachers a much-needed raise, as well as our classified staff. So thank you, Mr. Ellison, and Mr. President, I turn the microphone back over.
Thank you. Do any other school board members want to speak? Yes, Mr. Jaramillo.
President Frank, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say one more thing. It always comes down to money, and tonight's not the time to discuss this further, but I do have some ideas that I would like to propose to my fellow board members at the appropriate time, and also to the city councilors regarding an idea that I have that could potentially pay for some additional security guards, or pay for, this would be new money through our city. I proposed this many months ago, and I would like to further discuss maybe a plastic bag fee that could generate anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. My idea was for this money to go to children, and in a way this would go to protecting children. It wasn't my idea. I wanted it my idea was for it to pay for all the school supplies for children in Las Cruces Public Schools, or go to parks, or I just wanted the money to go to to children and to students, but maybe this could be a way, in another session, maybe we could talk a little bit about a plastic bag fee that could generate a lot of money that might be able to help with this situation.
Thank you. So I think at this time, we should move on to public input. But before we move to public input,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the audience?
yes. Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to do before we get to public input is I want to get a few ideas on the table, run it by City Council, and then one last hear from the school board and see how we might be able to work together, and then allow public input onto that plan, if I may.
Sure.
So if I could take the indulgence and call back Todd Gregory, is he still here? Is he back there? Is he outside? Oh, in the foyer. Okay. Well, we'll just say. Now here he comes. What I was hoping to do is just get a couple ideas on the table here and just see exactly what we can do in a short-term basis and kind of focus on those. There's been a lot of good points that have been brought up today, and perhaps those can be used at another future work session. I think today's work session, based on a lot of input that we received, should be just focused on school safety. And so what I wanted to do was ask, as he gets Todd, so let me ask you something. There's been a lot of good discussion here. Do you have, if you had a list that you would like to have done, hypothetically today, and we could wave a magic wand and the money was there, what do you feel, in your opinion, that you would like to have it consistent throughout the schools that your department takes care of? Is it every school have all the doors, just a certain type of security lock that has to be on there, some cameras? I guess I'd say like low-hanging fruit. What do you need like now? If the bond money is not here yet, what could you use right now?
Sorry. So, well, I think, of course, what I think's important right now is to really finish our projects for the lobbies and access control, because that way it gives us an opportunity to at least control access to our schools. And I think one of the other big pushes is education for the community, for our staff and leadership, just education on how to respond to these incidents. And I think that's where the city, the school resource officers can help us, because I think that ALICE training is important, or that form of training is important for everybody to have, and not just school members, but the whole community.
Okay, so let me go a little bit further here. So I wrote down a few things that we, the council and I, were able to take away from our first work session, and some that really come to mind that just focus on school safety are panic buttons for teachers, security doors on certain, as I mentioned before. As I go to the different elementary schools, some have good security doors, some have really good security doors, and some are like, they have a picture, an intercom, a camera, and who are you and what do you want? And then they push the button and it opens up. Are there plans for that for all the schools? And if so, how much does that cost? We had a blank check. Just that part right there is.
Can I do Dr. Evil, like $1 billion?
$1 million.
But I mean, we do have. Is Gloria here? I know Gay.
Mr. Mayor,
we do have costs on that, or we do have it broken down.
I'm going to look to the deputy superintendent. I know he's been doing some research on this. So, do you want to come up with the CFO? And if I may, Mr. President, Mr. Mayor, we might be able to get some more information.
Or even a ballpark. It doesn't have to be exact, but in that ballpark. That's that. And then I think it's been already addressed about arming security guards, those with prior law enforcement experience.
Right. and I get the one point that I think we need to know is that I mean, security cameras, intercom, and safety security technology. What a lot of times we need help with is how do you maintain that over 10 years? How do you upgrade the networks? How do you replace the cameras? A lot of times, you know, when we get funded to build a school, and we've been looking at that with PSFA and how to fund it. Now, they'll give you money to wire it, but you can't buy the camera, or you have to buy the camera. We have to buy the camera. But there's these other costs, you know, we can do a lot of this up front, but it's what do we do in 5 or 10 years? How do we maintain the network? How do we replace, you know, because all that, it has a shelf life. And once we put them in, I go, we do need to keep that upkeep. And I know Gabe and them at our last board meeting had a pretty good breakdown of that cost.
So if I may, Mr. President, members of the board, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Mayor, city councilors. So in looking at it, I mean, we're talking about two different measures. So one of the things is we kind of have the reactive measures on one side. So cameras and things like that kind of help us solve crimes, but it's also that preventative piece that's huge for us. So it's that exterior envelope, that interior envelope of our classrooms after studying events that have happened. And so in looking at that, and we built schools to be hubs of communities. And if you walk into some of our schools, I mean, they're open to everybody. So now as we're looking at that, it roughly will run between, for an elementary school, $70,000 to $100,000 to kind of build that interior envelope for us there with security doors and kind of all the features that go along with that. That's kind of one piece of it. The other piece is as you get to secondary schools, I mean, our campuses are big and large, so we're looking at kind of some different options with that. And as Todd mentioned, as we're building new schools or as we're remodeling, we're including that in, and we're working with the state. They set aside some money for specifically for safety systems. And so we're looking, as we come in and do some remodels, that becomes the part, and that becomes kind of the district standard. So you mentioned the button and the camera, and you know, if you get 100 people there and you have, you know, an office staff that's working, and I mean, how can we tell the difference between who is who? And a lot of these events happen, are caused by people that we know, or even, you know, people actually that work or have worked or have relatives in the schools. So we're kind of moving to a district standard of creating kind of some of these security doors and keeping kids safe. I'm really proud of Lynn Middle School too with the fencing. I was an assistant principal years ago, and we're right on the street, and middle school kids are playing, having lunch, and just things like that. And we also want to keep them feeling comfortable for kids. We want them to be safe, but we also don't want to feel like that they're these prisons for students. So that's a great example of another project. Our security fence projects are running, depending on kind of the areas, running around $100,000 a school as well. So.
100,000 to begin?
Yes. Yes, 100,000 per building.
Yes.
Per building. For the security fences, and then Deputy Superintendent, go back to your first quote per elementary school. You gave a round figure of.
So it's running between $70,000 to $100,000 per elementary school, depending on what we're having to come in and retrofit. But that's putting in, you saw some of the pictures earlier, those security doors up front, some access control where people, we're doing card readers, we're doing some different things, and then it gives access control for teachers coming in and gives them the ability not to have to look for a key, but actually have some quick access for that.
So Mr. Mayor, about 2.5 million, and then I'm going to look to the Chief Financial Officer. When we give all employees a 1% raise, what's that figure?
It's all employees. It's probably that's probably closer to 2.5 million.
2.5 million, yes. And then when we take all employees and move them up one step on the pay scale, what's that figure?
All employees, that would probably be around 2 million. And of course, these are ballpark figures. Normally, we talk about just certain bargaining units, but all employees are probably closer to 2 million. And yeah.
So we're just trying to build you some information as we look at numbers.
That's
something
perfect.
that they like to do all day, but I usually run from those meetings. So.
Right. So if I want to just clarify one thing, the funding that I said we had was sufficient was to start. And so as we're talking about $100,000 for the interior, the $100,000 for the exterior, those are the initial costs. Todd brings up the point about maintenance. We're also not talking about the systems that we're looking at in addition to that, which are the door access systems themselves. And so if we were to implement a new door access system, that integrate it with our cameras, which not all of our schools currently have cameras, which is a big concern for us. That's also going to be an additional cost. And I know that there's probably, I know Matt's behind the camera, but he has a cost on per door, which is probably about $1,500 per door or something like that for that. And then the system itself is pretty expensive. And then, of course, that has to be maintained. And then the security guards as well. And so funding for the whole thing indefinitely as an ongoing thing is not there. The funding that's sufficient is to start the project. So I just want to make sure that was one clarification.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yes,
Mr. President.
thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. So, Dr. Ewing, when that bond money comes in August or September, whenever you're supposed to get it, that money is what would be used to do some of the things that, I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Mr. Ellison.
Mr. Ellison.
Mr. Ellison had discussed?
Yes, sir. That is exactly correct.
So if hypothetically, of course, we're going to need council approval, if we were to lend you, because you can't get it, you know, let's say in 3 months, 4 months, you can't do all the schools in 4 months, can you? But you could.
That would be impossible.
You would do about how many schools in 4 months?
We could probably do
half, a fourth, a third.
About 4. Yeah, I was thinking about 4. Probably do about 4 schools.
So and that would leave, and you would need to do how many? 4 out of.
We've not publicly released that
Oh, okay.
information
Right.
just for
We're-
safety reasons.
Okay, so what percent? Or, okay.
So we're
Probably about 10%.
So let's say we lent $1 million. That'd be enough to buy whatever equipment and start doing what you need to do. And after 3 or 4 months, you probably will have completed those number of schools, and then your regular money comes in?
Yes, sir, but when we start a project, we don't fund those up front. We're very careful as we put those, a request for purchase, those RFPs out. We don't pay until the work is complete. We don't want anyone to come into the building and obtain money from us up front. So I don't think the upfront cost, I'm looking at Ed, is our issue. Right. Our bigger issue is the recurring revenue that's required to continue to maintain those systems. I think as we begin the projects, and I'm looking to staff, we have the funding, but I certainly will not be shy to come and ask you if we do need it. The other thing that we've talked about, there are only a certain number of companies that can do the work that we need done. And so those companies have to be bonded, they have to be approved, they go through an actual bidding process. And so even if we wanted to do something in all 41 schools at one time, I don't think we have the infrastructure available with companies that are licensed, bonded, and insured and ready to work in those buildings. So that's why we usually like to take a project of 4 schools at a time. In this area, it seems to be that's about what we can handle. But again, I'm going to defer. Mr. Ellison, do we have money in the checking account if we were to start the projects?
We have reallocated some of our projects out of those capital funds. And so, Mr. Mayor, the money we have up front, and I did speak with the city's financial officer, and we do have not the capacity to exchange money like that between governments. And so for a loan like that. And so I think we have the money to start the projects out of our capital
funds. There's some
funds.
technicalities on that, but we work that out.
Okay.
Yeah, you let the policymakers deal with that.
We'll let them.
Yeah.
But so we have the funds to start it, and then when we get so we actually deferred furnishing some of our schools that were on schedule this year to receive furniture in order to allocate those funds for this project this summer. And so those are going to come on next year. So we had 3 schools that were due to get furniture this year that we had delayed a year in order to start this project.
You know, this may be something that, of course, either City Manager Eid and City Council, we need to do this, is look at how we may want to, when it comes to that type of technology, you know, obviously the city also has certain buildings that we need to protect, you know, whether it's our laboratories regarding our wastewater or drinking water. I mean, we have people who try to break into that as well. I mean, we want them to poison our water system. So we may want to look at ways that if we can work together and share with the technology we have and who we use, and because there are other organizations out there that almost our turnkey. I mean, there's so many businesses that will do that. I don't know how that's worked. I don't know if we've even reached out in that capacity, but I think that's something that we can take a look at.
Mr. Mayor, I think that's a really excellent idea, and I'm going to look to Todd. One of the things that we're looking at is, again, I keep talking about new systems because we're quickly going to outgrow our current door access system and some of our security systems. And if there was a way that with the city we were able to kind of merge and share systems in a way that would make it easier for our local law enforcement and our security guards, if it was a similar system or something that we could share, I think that would be something in an area that we would look at as we move forward, and that would be something.
Because if you're concerned about the ongoing costs, which is a rightful concern, we may have a different opportunity to share how we do that. Because we have a pretty complex technology department that needs to does a lot of the same things. So. Okay, well that clarifies that. That's good.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Mayor.
thank you.
we got. Now I do have a couple questions. Earlier you said that there were 10 schools that have SROs.
Yes.
Okay, so now how many schools are in just the city of Las Cruces? And because a lot of times it's we're pretty much. We have to spend the money in the city of Las Cruces. I mean, I know there's a few schools that are outside the city, and perhaps that's where we can work with the county to bring in the SROs from that end. But
So
in the city,
I think to begin to answer your question, a better answer from my chair is we have an SRO, which is a Las Cruces Police Department police officer in the 4 comprehensive high schools.
Okay.
We have a New Mexico State University Police Department on the campus at NMSU with our early college high school. And then we have SROs in our middle schools, except for, I'm looking at Todd, Zia Middle School, which is covered by the Mesilla Marshal. Did I get all of that correct?
Yeah, so Mesilla does, like, you're trying to cover Rio Grande and Zia, as well as the elementary in Mesilla. Okay. And we've had, official MOUs with them, with the city, on how we, divvy up the funds and how we do that. In MSU, we're in kind of negotiating with them. We're looking at costs, but they do have an officer that does spend quite a bit of time, specifically this year, at the early college high school campus. Again, those are mostly just the secondary and high schools.
okay. So roughly then, it looks like the SROs are not present in the elementary schools.
That is correct, and that's why we're looking at security guards for next year as a first step. And we certainly would welcome any conversation that the city council members would like to have, along with the school board. If we were to look to any type of additional assistance, we would welcome that.
Okay, and so Chief Gallagher, let's just say a new, say an SRO, or let's just say a new police officer. I think their starting salaries $40,000 a year or so, and then plus benefits, 55, give or take, 55, 60 in that ballpark?
It's a fair estimate.
Okay, so if we were to do, a few years back, the city council, very brave. They had to do it because the state took away our money. It's called hold harmless. They didn't hold up to their agreement. And they promised to keep the city's gross receipts tax intact, but basically we had to raise gross receipts tax. And when we did that, the council and I promised that we'd only use it for a few things, primarily for capital improvements, money that if we spent now would save us future monies. Capital improvements, certain economic development items, and sustainability projects like solar. We knew that if we bought a solar project, after 15 years it'd be paid for, and then that's just money that comes in. There was another part that we put in there was municipal services. I would probably want to do a district meeting, 6 of them, because that's what I did. I did 6 in the beginning. The first 2 were tough. They didn't believe us, but this council has held to that promise. Although it's in there, I would feel better that if I did the whole city and just said, if we use about $2.5 million, because that's about what you need to do all the elementary schools, shift that 2.5 million or so to the chief's budget, and then you hire, or however you need to do the SROs for the elementary schools. That, or I figure it'd take a $20 a year tax increase on your property taxes for the whole county, and that way the sheriffs, the other schools that are not in the county get SROs as well. But frankly, I think the county could do that right now because they pass the same gross receipts tax, and they didn't get hurt as bad as the city. The city got hurt by $8 million a year. The county got hurt by like $500,000 a year, and they're still getting the same amount of money that we're getting. So that's one thing. So I guess what I'm trying to get is that, so we have a focus now on security cameras and things of that nature. I think they're working on the arming of security guards there, and this will be something here for council to discuss if they want to look at allowing city manager to free up some of that gross receipts tax money that we're getting in. Fortunately, it's actually been coming up a little bit higher than we projected, so that's good. And then we shift that to the chief's budget, and he does with that to make sure we have SROs in the schools. So I think we've covered quite a bit, that I think that we can do for today. I think these are things that we can tackle and we can begin to build on, and I think that's important. I think that's what many of you have come here to share your concerns about. But I may talk with council on some of these items after we finish up with that, if I may, Mr. President. Public comment?
Okay, sure.
So, council members, would you care to comment on that? How do you feel about the gross receipts tax? Councilor Flores?
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Frank, and fellow councilors and school board members. I'd like to address the question that was brought up by Senora Flores, presented on behalf of Terry Dahlman, a school board member. And I'd like to say that the city is focusing very strongly. It doesn't answer her question completely, because her question was whether we had taken any steps in terms of in providing mental health care in that regard, and Councilor Ekman addressed part of it. But we do have a public safety policy committee, and that committee is looking at, it's taking a holistic view, and in fact, Mr. Gregory was at the last meeting, Dr. Hakis was at the last meeting, and the fire department was there, and the police department was there, and the mayor and I, and this is, all of this has been discussed. And what our policy committees do is work in conjunction with each other. So I serve on that committee with the mayor, and then I serve on the health committee with Councilor Ekman. And we're looking at solutions, and there are community members on those committees, not just city employees or elected officials. And we're looking at bringing these issues together and having them mesh, and we are looking at solutions. And then I'm also a member of the Coalition Against Bullying that Councilor Gandara chairs. So we're all working very hard, and in terms of allocating monies directly, no, but our personal resources and the fact that we are employees of the city, the resources, time is being spent, and all of our staff at different times, whether it's the chief of staff, whether it's the director of a certain department, or just different staff. But I do want to make it clear to our residents that we are looking at the city functioning in a very holistic manner. And I wholeheartedly agree with Mr. Mayor Ken Miyagashima's recommendation. He made that at the Public Safety Committee meeting, Policy Committee meeting, what was it, a week or two ago? It seems like a long time ago, that we do work towards providing funds on a temporary or loan basis, or I don't want to misspeak or anything, But I just want to, or misrepresent what the
Yeah,
mayor
we don't
represents.
call it a loan. We just, yeah.
Yeah,
But
but I
the
just
superintendent
want
said
to-
he didn't need the money.
Yeah, but the city is working very hard at looking at the whole picture, and I just want to assure people. I also want to share an anecdotal story.
Hey, please.
This is all about having conversations.
You, You're going to have to be patient. We will give people an opportunity. Well, I'm sorry about that.
May I finish?
Yes, you may finish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. President. All I want to say is that we're here because we're concerned about our children. And it's true that everybody wants to say what they want to say. But I have to say that I did meet with a young student, a sophomore at Las Cruces High School, who was there when there was some sort of a heightened state of awareness or concern, safety. And she did share with our group that she felt safe because she wasn't in the line of fire when this event erupted at Las Cruces High School. So I do want to say that our students do feel safe to a certain extent, and I want to keep focusing on working on making our children feel safe all the time. And thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope you were listening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Flores. Any other council members? Okay, so I'll recap some of the comments that were made and what we're going to focus on. And then as the President has the list of those who wish to speak and comment on what you've heard here tonight. So one of the things that I'm glad the Chief and City Manager brought up something really important. It's good, and it actually would be able to accomplish the same thing probably at a fraction of the cost. Is there's a lot of retired police officers who want to come back and work, but because they retired under a system called PARA, Public Employees Retirement Association, PARA doesn't allow them to take jobs back with the city. But if we can get legislation to allow on certain opportunities, such as an SRO, I'm sure they'll take $45,000 a year because they don't have to, because they already got their retirement. So now we can keep that cost down. We probably only need $1 million, and we can get those in right away. So I think we need to work on that. You heard what was the gentleman's name again? Your CFO?
Mr. Ellison.
And Mr. Ellison, his discussion on what we can do as far as technology, working with the city. I'll do a little bit of my part as I go to my next class later on this coming year. I guess I start in September on identifying those kids, and we'll help with our mental health partners to see what we can do about that. And I think that's about it. I think we've covered quite a bit. So now, Mr. President, I'll turn it over to you. Council didn't have any other further questions. So
Before we get to public input, I just want to thank you for your willingness to work with us to solve these problems. I know it's greatly appreciated by me and the rest of the board, so thank you. And we are now going to move to public input. But before we move to public input, I would like to remind our audience of the board's procedures for handling public comment. Each speaker must complete a sign-up sheet. If you haven't, it's too late now. Prior to speaking, public comment for this special meeting is limited to 2 minutes. It will be timed per individual speaker. We have allocated 1 hour for public input. At this time, we have 31 people, 31 speakers signed up to address the board and council. Regardless of how many speakers have had an opportunity to speak, we will stop public input after 1 hour. So try not to use your 2 minutes, obviously. The board welcomes public input. The board does not prohibit public criticism. However, any person making public comments
shall be solely responsible for the content of his or her comments. The board neither adopts nor assumes responsibility for any comments made by individuals during the public input section of the board meeting. So we will now begin, and the first person will be Lori English. Please step up.
Mr. President? Mr. President? Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Jaramillo.
I will, if it's okay with you, I will be keeping the time. Is that?
Yes.
And then I just wanted to let the public know that I will hold up, I'll put a number 1 when they have 1 minute, and I will put a stop when they have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay? All right.
First of all, my name is Lori English, and I do live in the city. In fact, I live right across the highway from Oñate High School. All I have to say is, first of all, thank you very much for wasting 2 hours of our valuable time in, for the most part, which was stuff that should have been handled within the city council or within the school board meetings, including all this discussion about finances and such. Second of all, I'd like to thank this young man, Cameron, for standing up, because he's basically said what almost everybody out here feels, is we have to keep these two issues separate. It is not a gun control issue. It has nothing to do with gun control. It has nothing to do with AR-15s, semi-automatics, or revolvers. It has to do with the amount of time and the amount of time it takes to pull a trigger, whether it's a semi-automatic or a revolver. Only when you get in the category of an automatic weapon do you get into the multiple shot, fanning the room, clearing it out. So thank you very much for wasting our time. You wanted to give us courtesy, or us to give you courtesy, and you showed absolutely no courtesy to this entire audience out here. Thank you.
The next public input, and just to make things interesting, I will pronounce the first name and I'll let Mr. Mayor do the second name. So the first name is Stephen, and the second name?
Himanowski.
Very good. Thank you.
We know each other.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, City Council and Board of Education. First things first, we all have the same goal: keep our kids safe. Guns and school safety, 2 different items. Mr. Mayor, let me ask you, you said you got a CCW? You carry a semi-auto, don't you?
Yes.
So you willing to give that up?
No.
On a question of where the money's
Can you
coming
talk
from.
into the mic a little bit directly? Move the mic. There you go.
With the question of the money, you mentioned that we're paying 1/8 of a penny taxes and $2 million are going to the state. Bring it back. There's your money for your security.
Yeah, we just want it. We want it right here. It should be. It's your money. It should be here and spent in Doña Ana County, not in the 32 other counties.
Okay. Mental health. That shooting in Florida. Those 4 little students that said they were in school. They admitted to bullying that kid for over 2 years. Bullying is the issue. Mental health, not the guns. Locking down the schools. When I did a government building on motel, they have to have their little badges to get in and out of those vehicles, out of those doors. Do the same thing for the schools. Have one access inward and outward for any visitors coming in and out. Police officer can stand there, or a gym teacher, whatever, to make sure there's no guns coming in and out of that school. If the door is open, they'll be alarmed. Someone's teacher will walk out and see who it is. They open the door, let somebody in, or let somebody out. That's how we keep our guns out of schools. We don't need to be worrying about the Second Amendment. We're worried about security for the kids. Lock down your campuses.
Sir, your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Gavin Clarkson.
I'm Dr. Gavin Clarkson. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA, and I'm a single father of a 16-year-old boy. and I have been a teacher since 1991. And in the past 27 years, I've taught 5th grade, 8th grade, 12th grade, college, law school, MBA, and PhD students. I'm a licensed attorney with a Harvard Law degree, and I teach constitutional law. And there were several misconceptions at your last meeting about the Second Amendment. The right to defend ourselves predates the Constitution. It's a natural right. Justice Scalia described it as a pre-political right. The Second Amendment does not give us a right to bear arms. The Second Amendment stops government from infringing on our natural right and our God-given rights to defend ourselves. Now, schools are soft targets, just like airplanes were soft targets. But after 9/11, we didn't go on a nationwide ban and hunt for box cutters. We put armed air marshals on airplanes, and there has not been a single armed hijacking since that point when we put armed air marshals on airplanes. Every single school shooting, every single mass shooting you talked about was in a gun-free zone. 26 of the last 27 school shootings were by fatherless boys. So we clearly do have a cultural defect that we need to deal with. But you talk about budgets, I can give you a costless solution right now. Concealed carry in the classroom costs you nothing. And yet the only way you stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun. Now, let me paint you a picture. Let's assume I'm teaching. Let's assume that your students, your children, your grandchildren are in my classroom, and somebody walks in with an AR-15. This is all I have. It's my empty holster because you won't let me do concealed carry in my classroom. Let me paint you a different picture. I've got concealed carry. Some knucklehead walks in with an AR-15. I guarantee you, your kids and your grandchildren will go home safe that night. And if you would go back to the situation, if you remember the Sutherland school shooting, he was an NRA instructor who was the good guy with a gun, and he had an AR-15, and that's the guns that you're trying to ban. I recommend that you consider concealed carry, put it on your agenda. It will not cost you a thing, and it will keep our children safe. Thank you very much.
Time. Jesus Oropesa.
Oropesa, sir. Hi, my name is Jesus Omar Oropesa, and I'm Dr. Gavin Clarkson's Chief of Staff. Okay, I am a Navy veteran. I have 4 of my children that attend your public schools. You're telling me that in your office, you got a little red button, a panic button, for whenever something happens, so you can keep yourself safe? All right, so why should my kids have a panic button? Why do we have 2 armed police officers out here taking care of us right now, and my kids cannot have the same security? Right? We are talking about education and raising money to give these teachers more money. Why don't we figure out a way to make our schools bigger, have more classrooms? Instead of giving teachers raises, have more teachers to go ahead and have less students in their classrooms so they can go ahead and teach these students a little better. Our teachers are overwhelmed, and giving them a raise is not going to make our kids learn anymore. What we need to do is figure out a way to go ahead and give these students the opportunity that they deserve. And by you guys taking guns away and not allowing guns in our schools is not going to keep my children safe.
Lucy Garcia. It appears Lucy is not here. Oh, thank you.
Hello, my name is Lucy Garcia. I'm a very concerned citizen of New Mexico. Semi-automatic weapons are not a problem in New Mexico or America. Our problem is politicians who have continued to ignore the problem of mental illness. Part of our Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, just down the street, south of us in Mexico, and we already know that bad hombres do not respect our gun laws. Remember how President Obama accidentally loaded them up with assault weapons? Well, we Americans who live close to our borders are in more danger than ever before. And it's a lesson. Our firing capabilities is infringed on our constitutional rights to defend ourselves adequately and fairly. Yes, work to keep our schools safe, but please leave our weapons alone, because we need to be ready to defend the New Mexicans from those bad hombres. And I'd like to take this opportunity to say we were victims of virtual kidnapping. For those of you who don't know, it's happening here in Las Cruces. We were victims of that. We got a call from a Mexican that said that if we didn't do as we were told, they're gonna send our sons fingers and mail them to us, and they were gonna shoot them in the head. So this goes to all the families and all the people in New Mexico. It's just not our schools, it's all New Mexico, and it's all the states along the border. Thank you very much.
Iver Vaidana.
My name is Ever Vadana, sir. And negligence, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the failure to exercise the care that a reasonably prudent person would exercise in like circumstances. I just want to say that a reasonable person would not post a sign outside his house that says no burglars allowed. They would arm themselves or try to defend themselves somehow. Now, this is nothing more than a political stunt that we're trying to do by our whatever party is ruling right now, the city council. I'm sure that when I had a friend in sophomore year in high school, which I came here to Oñate High School, and he recorded some sicko who we all knew wasn't a very right-off person, and he said that they were going to shoot up the school. I don't know if there's any administrators here who were in this school when it happened. It was 4 years ago. What did we do at Oñate? That's right, we posted no more guns allowed. No, we added armed resource officers, and that's the answer. I say that I have a sister and a brother, an elementary school brother, who was threatened by another kid to take a gun, and then after that didn't work, he threatened with stabbing him. It's not the gun, it's not the knife, it's the person behind the atrocity. I just want to say that, and I just read an article in Las Cruces Sun News that the administration for LCPS increased by 60%, but the student enrollment in LCPS increased by less than 2%. I say we allocate our money properly and focus on the security of our students, and let's focus on something that actually has been proven to reduce the amount of crimes, not something that we've been proven wrong by Nice, France, by Canada, and by other countries. Gun control or any restriction of sales will not work in the United States, or it hasn't worked abroad. If I'm wrong, I hope I am someday, but till today, I'm proven right. Thank you.
Max Sanchez.
Hi there, guys. My name is Max Sanchez. I am here as a concerned student. I am a student over at Centennial High School, and I'm also a member of the Las Cruces Public Schools Student Advisory Council. You know, at the risk of seeming too monotonous, I really just want to emphasize the fact that the issue of gun control and Second Amendment rights and all that other stuff and school safety are two completely separate things. And I don't think that anyone can fire back at me with the fact that I'm some right-wing radicalist who wants to defend my rights and, supporting the Constitution with everything that I have and completely ignoring the safety of my peers, because the only thing that matters to me is the safety of my peers. And I am against the resolution of City Council Resolution 116, because the thing is that although it does make an attempt to help and better reduce all the school shootings and things that are going on right now, it ignores 2/3 of the entire issue, and it's not going to effectively address the bigger issue that is plaguing our school systems. And in my personal opinion, I think more so it's just trying to use this platform of school children to further a political agenda that is beyond the issue of school safety. And Councilor Smith, I'm not necessarily sure if that was an accurate statement when you were talking about that you guys are working on better mental health controls and asking the state for funding as far as making sure that our schools are better secured. But I think that it should have happened a long time ago, way before this resolution was even presented. But I think the topics that Cameron Castillo up there and Board Member Jaramillo brought up, they give you the opportunity to do so now. And I hope that you advocate for that instead of just pushing more meaningless legislation. Thank you.
Dan Parvat.
I don't hardly know what to say after hearing all these other explanations, but I'll attempt at saying what I feel. First of all, when we all stood and pledged our allegiance to our flag at the beginning of this meeting and to the Republic of the USA, I believe this includes our Constitution and all of its amendments, and none to be infringed. Secondly, our focus should be totally on school safety and not the Second Amendment. Thirdly, Resolution 18116, if it passes through our legislature, would restrict the rights of women to use semi-automatic weapons. And if that's not what the resolution says, then I need to be corrected on that, but I believe that's the way it was written, or at least that's my understanding. Last but not least, if we could identify other vehicles, drugs, and things that cause driving accidents and kill people on a daily basis, then we could just make a law against that and the problem would be solved. But obviously this doesn't work. It hasn't worked in the past. And passing another resolution to restrict our Second Amendment rights will not make our schools any safer, in my opinion. The criminals absolutely love gun control. It makes their jobs safer. And that's something to think about. That's the reason we have armed SROs in our schools, and I agree, we definitely need more. 5, the state and possibly federal tax credits for SROs that would be willing to volunteer in school is another way to possibly fund the funding issue. If we could give them tax credits on their state taxes at least, and I don't know if we could accomplish that at the federal level, but I think it's certainly worth pursuing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Lisa Parrott.
Hello, my name is Lisa Parrott, and I live at 2494 Cherokee Circle in District 6. I do oppose the passing of this resolution, and one thing that comes to mind to me just from what was said tonight, it's the appearance that the students would feel unsafe to see armed, trained personnel, safety personnel on their campus, and I don't think our students and our children would feel less safe with trained personnel being armed. That's a misnomer. I don't think that those two things are mutually exclusive. No guns equals safety, and armed, trained personnel with guns would be unsafe. So I just think that is something that needs to be looked at a little bit further, because I think our kids are smarter than that. Thank you.
Charles Yaryan. Charles Yaryan. Okay, we will go on to the next one. Ronnie Cisneros.
Hello, my name is Ronnie Cisneros. I live here in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Been here for 14 years. I'm an occupational therapy assistant. I've been doing that, as I said, for 14 years. I own a gun, have always owned a gun my whole entire life. The gun is not the problem. It's who's behind the gun, who's pulling the trigger. Gun safety, when I went to high school, we had hunter safety. It was something that was introduced with the public school system along with other parts of community active individuals that introduced gun safety. That thing doesn't even exist anymore. I have no idea what happened to it or what happened, but that's neither here nor there. But the issue here is I totally oppose this resolution regarding semi-automatics. I have nothing but semi-automatic handguns. I'm not a criminal. I've never been in the penitentiary. I've never been jailed. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and you individuals here do not have the right to take away the right from me that the federal government gave to me as a citizen of this country. You don't have the right to do that. And I stand by that, and I stand by that. And in regards to problems of how we're going to do it and where we're going to do it, we had to listen to all this smoke screen for about 3 hours of one thing this and one thing this, back and forth. The issue that I came here for was children's safety. Children's safety. And addressing that issue is what needs to be, not adjoining it with the Second Amendment, not adjoining it with semi-automatic handguns, and not adjoining with anything else. Address it, whether it be increased police presence, armed police presence on the schools, or whether it be teachers who are carrying handguns. But if an individual is coming down to the school and he's determined to do harm, then he needs to have harm addressed to him. Because there are innocent children there that should not become victims of an individual who is either disturbed, he's mentally ill, he's psychopath, he's on drugs, whatever the case may be. And I oppose that. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. If I could just say a quick word real quick and then resume the public comment. You know, thank you. I'll try to do it within 2 minutes. No, that's good. Don't start yet. So I've known Councilor Smith for almost 8 years on the board. He's a very hardworking, conscientious. He always listens to his constituents, wants to do the right thing. I think when he agreed to have another work session, you know, he took, and so did council, a lot of good comments from the first work session. When I asked earlier how many of you came to the first one, the majority of you hadn't. So you're thinking, and I don't know, I was going to ask Councilor Smith this, you're thinking that first resolution is still on the table. When he agreed to have a second work session, I think he agreed to it because he wanted to try to incorporate the input that was made from the others. I don't know, but I don't know if he's still, I wanted to ask him, and then that way there, because you guys keep talking about how we're talking about banning guns. I'm like, we never discussed that here. We talked about working with the city on technology to get security cameras, working to arm security guards, working to identify children who have mental health or bullying. So, Councilor Smith, would you care to comment? I mean, is that you're...
Mr. Mayor, giving the lack of control in the audience, I will confine myself to 10 seconds.
Hold on 1 second. All right, you know what? You've got, if you do not, you need to stop or you're going to be removed, all right? This may not be City Hall, but you got the City Council here. You will respect what's going on right here. If you don't like it, okay? Yeah, we are respecting you. You've got, okay, all right. I'm going to let Councilor Smith respond, and then we'll resume your public comments.
Mr. Mayor, thank you, and I would simply say that the point of the work session is to take more input, to consider that input, and to consider what would be the best way to describe what we want to do. That could include several amendments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd just like to say that nobody up here has interrupted anybody. I really can't say the same about some people in the audience. So, the next, I guess you're proving my point. The next person will be Patricia Rothengas.
My name is Patricia Rothengas, and I'm president of the Doña County Federated Republican Women. We are not here to talk about guns. We are here to talk about our children's safety. The two do not mesh. We do not need to talk about guns tonight. What I would like to see is the signs I saw as I entered this building: no guns allowed. That doesn't make us safe. That makes us sitting ducks. One of the first ways that we can get our schools safe is to let them know there is someone there to defend our children. I ask you to give our children the same kind of safety as when I go into a bank to get my money. Please protect our children by having security in the buildings so that they can be safe. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Wayne Grosskopf.
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. And this is for Mr. Smith. He's the one that brought up the subject about semi-automatic weapons. Everybody here is concerned about the safety of children. An unarmed security guard at a school, you know what he is? Another target. That gun-free zone out there sign, that's an invitation. Mr. Smith, I want to ask you one question. Have you considered what another piece of paper in the legislation, how much it will protect? Have you ever asked a woman that's been beat to a pulp, laying in a hospital, how much that restraining order protected her? Didn't do a damn bit of good. The other thing is bullying, and probably 90% of the shootings are created by bullying. First line of defense for that is the teachers. I give them all the credit. They have a tough job. Where it falls short, I blame that on the administration for not giving the teachers enough authority and not standing behind them enough to identify the problem and get the people that are being bullied and the bullies the help they deserve. Again, I thank you, and let's do something to protect the kids.
Joshua Haldeman.
I don't even know where to go with this. Pretty much everything here has been said before me. The guns outside, or the signs outside about guns, they are a joke. I'm a student at NMSU, and every day I go to school, I leave my protection behind. Everybody in this room has the right to defend themselves. We're talking about two separate issues, but we're not. Because you made everybody come here to the school and give up their guns to sit here. You put signs up so that we couldn't protect ourselves to or from this property. You're making us all sit here and say the same thing over and over and over. You know, take down the signs. They're not going to do any good. All they're going to do is keep the law-abiding citizens from protecting themselves. Give the teachers the right, if they want to have the training, if they want to conceal and carry, don't make it public. Make it known, though. Yes, we have conceal and carry teachers. That is a deterrent. Your sign out there is not deterring anybody that is intent on causing damage. I've got 3 kids in public schools. My kids are only safe when they're with me? That's what you're saying. Because I do have a conceal and carry. I've gone through the background check. I legally protect my family. I don't appreciate my rights being infringed on and my kids' protection being thrown out the window because somebody's scared a gun's gonna shoot itself. It's not gonna happen. Thank you, Cameron. I appreciate what you've said.
Betty Bishop.
Good evening, City Council, School Board. So you were looking for a solution, and school safety is a problem, and we acknowledge that. We all here acknowledge school safety is an issue we need to be addressing. When you're looking at funding, so the state budget is $6.1 billion. The amount that's spent on schools is more than half of that budget. K through 12 and higher ed is more than $3 billion in the state budget. Of the money that you're looking for to be able to afford more school resource officers, when you rolled out your city budget last week, $99.4 million in your city budget for your next fiscal year. Of that, $4.5 million is in your plan to spend on art in public places. $4.5 million needs to be spent on school resource officers in our public schools because your job is to keep the citizens safe. That safety needs to be a priority. So put our money, our tax dollars, where your mouth is, and protect the children with $4.5 million. Put those SRO officers, put those school resource officers in place, reallocate that money, and prove that you actually care enough to put the children above your politics.
David Montees. David Montees. Thank you. Lucy Garcia. Lucy? Oh. David Tofsted? David is coming down.
While he's making his way, the city is looking to put the resources in for the funding for the SROs.
Good evening. My name is David Tosted. I'm the candidate for District 36, but I also worked for 36 years out at the White Sands Missile Range as a PhD physicist. And so I wrote 70 research papers, and I know the difference between cherry picking and actually doing a complete analysis. And what we saw tonight was just cherry-picked data. Now, maybe for the sake of time, you didn't go through the full set of many incidents, but you have to look at every incident and how many times was a semi-automatic used when there was only like 1 or 2 people killed and not dozens. And maybe it was because there was somebody there who was defending and who kept that killer from doing him more harm. I will take with me the comment that the mayor made, which was that we want to make sure that these people who've retired can actually work as security guards and that they can have concealed carry and get onto the school property, and maybe that's a change we can make in the state law so we don't have to wait for the city or the school district to make up their mind over a long period of time. The other thing is, if it comes to bullying We need to deal with bullies, and we have comprehensive frameworks and climate surveys and 100% commitments, but that doesn't answer the problem that children are saying is the problem. The problem is the bullies, and they need to be dealt with because they're a continuing problem in the schools. Thank you.
Denny Atchley.
All right, first off, I'd like to thank you guys for organizing this event so we can actually hear from the community that you guys represent. And I'd also like to thank all the audience members out here. I look across and I see dozens of veterans and active duty service members and active duty police officers, so thank you all for the service that you have done for this community. First off, my name is Denny Atchley and I go to Las Cruces High School. I'm 17 years old and I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. And from that standpoint, I stand by the rule that guns are not the problem, people are the problems. Guns don't go off by themselves and kill people, so why are we going after the guns when we should be solving the problem of the people? Madam, you pointed out that you talked to a student from Las Cruces High School that during this big scare that we had, she wasn't afraid. And I guarantee you she did not represent the majority, because the majority, probably I'm just saying that 3/4 of the kids didn't show up to school the next day. I got 2 of my friends with me that also go, or 3 that go to Las Cruces High School, and most of the kids didn't even show up for school the next day, and I'll tell you why they were scared. We have 1 armed security officer at Las Cruces High School, and if you've been to Las Cruces High School, you know that it is a big, big school. There's probably 2,000-ish kids that go there. Now, why is only 1 person armed on that campus and responsible for protecting all those kids? If a school shooter comes in on one end of the campus, it's going to take him minutes to get over there, and by that time that shooter could have killed however many people. So that's the problem that we should be addressing, not the guns that you guys like to go after. And I'd also like to say, Chancellor Smith, the statistics that were on the board at the beginning of this presentation stated that more gun restrictions lead to fewer crimes. So can you tell me how cities like Chicago and New York City have so much crime with so much gun restrictions? Thank you very much.
Dr. Ernest Flores.
City Council and school board members, I won't go over some of the topics that you discussed this evening about the mental health situation. I'm a psychiatrist in the community, and I can tell you that there is a great shortage of mental health practitioners in this community. I'm the only private psychiatrist right now in Las Cruces, and the population is 100,000 people. And so obviously there's a big need that has to be addressed, not just by this body, but also by our state legislators who I don't believe are here today, which probably would have been nice if they had been here. So clearly, and locally, I would just say about our mental health system here, I have to say I've been here for 34 years, and I have to say that the system is fragmented. And I think it kind of got worse with our current administration had dismantled the community mental health system, and I think we're all aware of that. So it's going to take an effort, I think, by the county, by the city, which I think will help the school and help the kids in the school. And the final thing I just want to say is that I'm part of the national 81% of the population of this country, and I'm a citizen. We're all citizens, and I live in this community with you. I'm part of the 81% who believe in some sensible gun regulation that will keep. I have the rights as a citizen to feel safe. I don't feel safe with a lot of guns in the community, but we are neighbors, and I always wish that when we have this debate that we can come together, like Mr. Jaramillo said, to come up with some solutions. And I think that moving forward, I hope that, that the energy and the voices who care passionately about their rights, I respect your rights, I have rights, and I just hope in the future that we can all work together. Thank you.
Armando Aviar.
Hello, my name is Armando Alvear. Thank you for letting me speak. The way I see it, this is a progressive problem. It started a long time ago in England. People were not allowed to protect themselves, so they left England and came to the United States. Then when they were in the United States, they could protect themselves, they had freedom of religion. Things got out of hand and it's getting just like it used to be in England. People are losing their rights to do all kinds of things. And that's why there's no more morals in this country, because we got God out of school. That's the main thing. That's all I have to say.
Greg Vaiz. Yes.
I'm a father of 4. I wanted to ask all of you, why is it that we read about these shootings and we see these shootings happen? Why is it always at a school? And I'll tell you why. Because at a school, it's a soft target. It never happens at a gun shop. It never happens at a police station. Because if they walk into a police station, they're going to be met with the same amount of force that they walk in with. But if you go to a school, they're met with doors, locks, gates, and panic buttons. I think I'd rather have a gun to protect myself rather than a panic button.
Stephen Peroni.
Thank you. So as a reminder, a lot of these people understand that the resolution is changing. We're talking about semi-automatics because it was talked about on stage. We need to remember that just because semi-automatics if they were to disappear one day, that does not mean school shootings would stop or that school massacres. 4 days ago, a man in China stabbed 9 children to death and wounded 10 others. And that is not the least graphic on just that country. The worst massacre in our school massacre in our country's history was a bomb that was put on a school that killed 44 children. Murderers, criminals, will always find a way. So, the main topic is school safety. We have 41 public schools here, and we're talking about budgets and money, and the mayor made a great point, and I don't know what a police officer costs the city. In my rough estimation, it is about the same to put one officer every school as the $2.2 million that the state is using from our taxes. That would be a great thing, but what are some other options, although maybe a stretch, that we could put in our toolbox to investigate? I spent 8 years in New Mexico Search and Rescue, where we were responsible for our own training in national and state emergency systems, making sure we were field ready, we could survive if things turned against us due to weather or whatever circumstance. Monthly mandatory trainings and monthly attendance to those trainings and certifications. There might be an option there of putting a SAR type, search and rescue type of system for our schools where we could have anonymous members of the community. Okay.
Thank you. Dave Gaus.
My name's Dave Gallus, and right after our last session, I sent to every city council member and the local newspapers my suggestions about school safety, and I think they were pretty good. And I heard people dancing around the ideas, panic buttons, security doors, but but I don't think you folks are really serious because, you know, you give us 2 minutes to talk, but you take as long as you want. So if you really want public input, you got to listen to what we say. But I have a real serious question. Does the city, the county, the school system receive any funds, any federal funds from the Promise Program or the Race to the Top initiative in any way? Can you guys answer that? Because that's a federal program. And what that does, that let the last mass shooter into the school system, the fellow Cruz, because he was identified many times by the students, by his own family, by the teachers, and because they were getting federal funds to reduce the amount of crime, they reduced the statistics, but did not stop the crime or the criminal. So if you're really serious about this, you take care of the school security. And, you know, I got feedback from Mr. Smith only with my suggestions about school safety, and I appreciate you getting back to me. But I don't think you folks are serious, because if you were, you'd find the money no matter what, because nothing more important than our kids. So can anybody answer that? Do you get any money from the federal government for the Promise Program or the Race to the Top initiative? Yes? No? I take that as a yes, probably. Thank you.
Edward Burlbaugh.
Well, he's coming down, the city of Las Cruces doesn't receive that, so I don't know about the county or the schools.
Yes, my name is Edward Burlbaugh. I have a PhD in physics. I've been in science and engineering for 9 to 40 years. One of the things that we learn in science and engineering is that we have to look at the data. And the other thing we learn is that correlation between two sets of data does not indicate causation. Meaning that there's a high correlation in this data that we saw between shootings and semi-automatic weapons, but that does not mean that the semi-automatic weapons were the cause of the shooting. So I think Mark Twain put it, there are three kinds of lies. There are damn lies, and there are statistics. So we are here to discuss school safety, and I heard a lot of good ideas that pertain exactly to school safety, but banning semi-automatic weapons is not one of them. The other thing I'd like to say is that many times our city government and our county government and our state government has sessions such as this. They take our input and then they go and do what they choose to do and what they wanted to do all along. And I would just submit that our recycling program is probably one of those programs that was somebody's great idea, but it's costing us, and in particular our poor folk, a lot of money, and will continue to cost us money as the Chinese take fewer and fewer of our recyclables. Now, that was not very popular by the public. So I don't believe that this resolution has been very popular to the public, but I think we have to keep an eye on it because chances are it's going to show back up. Thank you.
George Duran. George Duran.
Roberto Sea, this is hard to read this last name. Mayor Gonzalez.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, City Council members, school board. I believe some of the City Council members remember me from the March 19th meeting. I was the only Oneonta High School student and Las Cruces Public School student to speak. So I'd like to go over quickly with Councilman Smith. I don't believe you mentioned Virginia Tech, but there was a Walter P22 and a Glock 9mm used. Those are both semi-automatic weapons that resulted in 32 deaths. But you didn't bring that up at all, and that was in 2007 at Virginia Tech. Also, if we want to talk about including more weapons in our schools, we need to talk about including the sheriff's office as well. We have a wide variety of law enforcement in the state, and DASO is not being seen to be used here at all whatsoever. All I see is LCPD. Here at Oneonta, we have Officer Gomez, who is outstanding. Another thing, let's see here, what do I have written down? The City Council commended the students for walking out on March 14th, but didn't speak about the students today at Cruces High School that walked out in support of the Second Amendment. My friend, Casey Jordan Marquez, was killed at Aztec High School in New Mexico on December 7th of 2017. And I did not see anybody from Oñate caring much for them too, for Casey nor Paco, who was killed that day. Unfortunately, we have kids walk out for people that we've never heard of, people that we've never seen, never even heard of Parkland, Florida, for lack of a better word. And I find that to be a slap in the face, not only to myself, but all the people in Aztec that lost those two amazing people that day. So I ask of you to remember them as well, and not just the two that were killed on the other side of the country on another seaboard. Another thing in result to that, let's see, you know, when we talk about it, we talk about these school shootings and we talk about the ones that are big, Columbine, Sandy Hook, and a lot of our politicians stand on the graves of those people, and that's not fair to them, and we do not do them justice by standing on their names. So I think we need to remember, especially the two in Aztec that were not shown on the news but were killed by a 9mm Glock. That didn't do much justice to them, because had it been an AR-15, it would have been all over the news. But since it was a semi-automatic handgun, it was not. Thank you.
Nathan Lidrich. Nathan Lidrich. Oh, thank you. I'm blinded by the lights.
School safety is very important, of course. Many people who support gun control are rightfully angry and appalled at all the mass shootings and the resulting deaths that have occurred in our schools and throughout the nation. But the Second Amendment supporters, such as myself, we also are upset about those deaths. Do you really believe that banning semi-automatic rifles, such as the one that's in my gun safe at home, is going to deter gun violence in your schools? Banning me and my wife's semi-automatic handguns might be the next step that we purchased here in Las Cruces in order to attend training and secure our concealed handgun licenses here in New Mexico. I'm a citizen of the United States and of the great state of New Mexico, and I'm a disabled American veteran. I served honorably in the Armed Forces protecting personal and property as a law enforcement specialist for many years. While performing these duties, we focus mainly on deterrence, being observant, being seen, avoiding complacency, investigating and reporting suspected unusual activity, and of course, keeping the peace. The modern AR-15 and today's semi-automatic handguns are defensive tools. They're not fully automatic. Good citizens should have an equal means of responding appropriately to threats of this nature. That includes the teachers in the schools. Honestly, getting rid of certain guns is not going to change violent behavior, which leads me to say, rather than burdening the people of this community with more gun restrictions, the focus needs to be on the root cause of school shootings, executed by pathological, violent individuals who are sick, demented, and lack a clear moral compass. In no way do I intend to insult, offend, or put down anyone here today. However, I'd like to suggest some alternatives, but unfortunately, I'm only given 2 minutes, and it says stop.
Thank you, sir.
Randy Lynch.
Hi, I'm Randy Lynch. I'm glad for everybody that's come out to support our constitutional God-given rights. We need to be doing that constantly because you have to do it every time. You have to defend every time. All it takes is one victory by those who want to take away our rights, where we have to win every time in defending them. But there's something that's been sticking in my craw for a while about our city council. It seems like we have a love affair on our city council with passing resolutions. This is the latest one. As Councilor Smith said, we haven't passed this resolution yet. We know we're not done with this, or other resolutions. The thing is, you guys on the city council, you're representatives. You represent us, the people of Las Cruces. You hear, there are a ton of people here who are completely opposed to the gun legislation that you've been talking about with the original resolution, whatever you decide to do going forward. Even though groups like the PVA didn't show up, which I figured they kind of would, but I was surprised, there's a bunch of people in this town who support gun laws, more gun laws. The bottom line is for the city council to be representing us, the people, and to do a resolution either supporting gun legislation or opposing it at the city level, you're saying that the people of Las Cruces support that agenda that you're pushing. In either case, it wouldn't be true. So by going ahead with these resolutions, all you're really doing is perpetrating a lie. So I would ask that you consider a little bit of integrity and represent the people.
John Novelo.
Good evening, council members and school board. My name is John Novello. I teach at Highland Elementary. I've been a teacher in this district for 13 years. I'd like to first applaud the efforts of this council and the reception you've given this audience. My objective is to draw attention to school safety measures that are in place within our community currently. I recognize that some of these measures are already enacted. I point to schools like Monte Vista where they have a very secure entryway, schools like Columbia Elementary that have that panic button, they can shut the doors and lock them down. In my previous address at the school board, I asked for more movement towards altering the state and district budgets to better fund these schools and projects like the proposal I set forth to you. From the comments of the council and the board, I understand you are working towards this effort diligently. However, let us not fool ourselves. At the end of the day, when the school is closed, the children are gone, we lock the doors and arm the building against theft and vandalism. We protect the stuff, but we haven't done it during the day well enough. I'll close in asking the public to please direct your public education department, your state representatives, and continue bringing up the issue of bringing the state money back to the schools. Thank you.
Holly Das. Holly Das. Thank you.
Good evening. I am a teacher in the district. I teach special education, 4 and 5-year-olds with severe cognitive disabilities. I am also a law-abiding gun owner, and I do have my concealed carry license. I appreciate this meeting and the discussions that have been made and the steps that we are taking to secure our schools. I do understand that budget is an issue. I work in the schools. I know how budget is an issue. What can be done, though, tomorrow? I'm going to pick up my kids off the bus, and those parents are going to hand off their precious children, trusting them to me. How can I ensure their safety and my safety as well? Dr. Ewing, in these discussions about allowing staff members, whether it's staff members with security backgrounds or not, I just ask that you get our input, because I would gladly volunteer to have that opportunity.
Hannah Wilder.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak. Oops, here we go. Our children are in no-gun zones where most of these shootings occur, protected by unarmed people who may as well be crossing guards with bullseyes painted on their backs. Who are these unarmed security guards? Steven Seagal? Can they disarm an armed assassin shooting wildly into a crowd of students? No. Maybe they can hide a few students or usher them outside, but to what? Another assassin waiting outside to pick them off? Maybe a guard can shield a student with his body and get shot dead for his heroic efforts. What do we need most? Dead heroes or our children alive and safe in our schools? Look back here. Well, there aren't as many now, but there are armed police officers here taking care of us. This has been brought up before. Thank you, Cameron, and another person out here. We are adults, and we are being protected by armed police officers, no less. The only people, as I see it, who want unprotected, gun-free schools are those who are trying to advance their own political agendas, and they are using our children as props.
Okay, and this is the last public input, and it is Renee Sanchez.
Hi, good evening. My name is Renee Sanchez. I am the mother of 2 children. One is 2 years old, the other one is 6. He is in the 1st grade, and he is at Doniana, Doniana Elementary School. So we kind of fall in that we're in the county, but yet we're a public school. So when I go there, he says, oh, we had a lockdown today. I said, oh, okay, well, were you scared? How did it go? He said, no, it went good. I wasn't scared. Everything was normal. And I credit that to our principal and to all of our teachers there because they don't show them any fear. They have a great situation. Anytime anything like this happens, they have an emergency plan. They have their own staff walking around making sure everything's closed and secure. So that's great, and I'm glad that he's not disturbed or scared in any which way. Now, they are, with the bond passing, they did go ahead and get the money to allocate towards the security doors that we need so badly there at the school. But really, that's the only thing that it's doing, is preventing people from, when they enter, going to the right or to the left and going around the main office. Oh my gosh, 1 minute goes quick. So, let me get to really what I'm concerned about there at the school instead of everything else. The check-ins. When you go to the school, you have to check into the school. I'm there all the time. Like I said, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I volunteer at the school all the time. I pass my security clearance with you guys. So they say, no, you have to go check in. Okay, I go check in at the computer. It says visitor or volunteer. And I said, well, where does this actually go? And they said, well, nowhere. I already knew the answer. And I said, what do you mean it goes nowhere? They said, no, it's just to let us know who's on the property if something happens. I said, so you're telling me that this isn't linked up to the police station in any which way? You're letting any pedophile in here, anybody that could be wanted, there could be a sex offender, and you're letting them into the school where my child is supposed to be safe? What if they grab one of those kids? Now, the other thing that I have a really big problem with is that there is a huge, and this is huge. There's a bus station there, and there's also a bunch of transients around the area. There's a lot of drug use around the area. I've seen people walking miles away. We really need a police officer there, sheriff, whoever it is. And I've asked the county commissioners, and they said that they would only be able to put a sheriff there if the school board invited them in. I don't know if that's true, but
please
we really
finish your
need
thought.
that. I know, thank you.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you. Yes. So I guess it never got turned in. Do we still have time left from our hour allotted? Is anybody keeping track of this? Okay, yes, please speak.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, Mr. President, councilors, and school board. I have a different take. Well, first of all, my name is Bev Courtney. I'm a concealed carry instructor. I also homeschooled my own kids up through high school. And the past 8 years, 10 years, I have trained a lot of teachers for free, and I still do that because there's a lot of self-defense apart from the firearm. But I'm not here to talk about firearms. I want to talk about truth. So when I address educators and government officials, please don't take it personal because it's not something that you started, you inherited it. So I see the problem is that educators have pursued social experimentation since the days of John Dewey, who's called the father of the modern education, and it's progressively gotten worse. So here in New Mexico, our children can't read, and they can't be sure if they are a boy or a girl, and they can't be sure of what sex they are attracted to. Just make it as fast as I can. And I say, let them alone and encourage purity until they are at least 18. So these, the other problem that adds to this is the lack of discipline, which people have mentioned that there's too many bullies, and they don't discipline the bullies. They need to be punished. And good behavior rewarded, bad behavior punished. It's just common sense. Somebody did mention, Mr. Gallus mentioned the Promise Program, which is the opposite of discipline. And then, as I was saying, our administrators, government officials, they have suppressed the truth, and they have created this problem. It's like they've created the crisis, and now they want to go after law-abiding citizens who are not the issue. So the increase in unrest and violence is directly related to the above policies I mentioned. Our children are fearful, they're rebellious, they're confused. The definition of confused is unhinged.
Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you,
Okay.
though, ma'am.
Thank you. Just last word. We don't know who the anti-gunners pledged their allegiance to. And so that fosters mistrust.
Ma'am, to be fair to everyone, I just want to say thank you.
Okay.
We allowed you to speak, but your time is up.
Thank you very much. I
Sorry
appreciate
about
it.
that.
Okay, it's fine. I'm going to send it in a letter to the editor, but thank you.
I would like to thank all the people that came up here and spoke during public input. Certainly want to thank the audience who sat respectfully through a very long meeting. Mayor, would you like to make some concluding comments?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to take a moment also to thank those of you for coming tonight. I know it's been a long night, but again, it's been something there that we do value your input. I appreciate Councilor Smith and his ability to grasp these issues that were discussed and see how they can come up and how that can be incorporated in his resolution. I'm sure he appreciates you being very candid with him. Most importantly, if that's all we've got, I'm going to need a motion, a second, to adjourn as a city council. And then I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure, and I'd like to have a motion to adjourn from the school board.
So moved.
Okay, we have a first with Senora Flores and a second with Secretary Castro. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the school board has adjourned.
Okay. And now I'll take a motion in a second.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilor Flores, second by Councilor Ekman, that we adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned. It's 9:22 p.m. Thank you again very much.
Okay, thank you.
Híjole.